Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
My new wife's son slapped me and my wife just laughed. He's only playing. My wife's daughter sneered. Go on, hit him back if you dare. I smiled gently and said, it's all right. That night, I quietly canceled their private school funding. The next morning, one letter from the school left them all speechless. Look, I'm not saying I saw it coming, but I definitely should have. When you marry a woman with 2 kids who already look at you like you're a temporary inconvenience between their mother and her credit card, you kind of sign up for a certain level of disrespect. But getting full-on pimp slapped by a 10-year-old on a Saturday afternoon, that wasn't in the brochure. It was one of those lazy Saturdays where the universe gives you exactly what you need. Sunshine streaming through the windows, a fresh pot of coffee brewing in the kitchen, and absolutely zero plans beyond finding the TV remote. And maybe, just maybe, watching a game in peace. The kind of day where you think, yeah, this marriage thing might actually work out. Spoiler alert, it wasn't working out. I was standing in the living room, minding my own business, trying to locate said remote among the hurricane of throw pillows Rachel had strategically placed everywhere like landmines of home decor. That's when Milo decided to walk up to me with the confidence of a Wall Street trader who just made his first million and smack. His little hand connected with my face so hard I swear I heard my ancestors gasp. For a second, everything went silent. The ceiling fan actually seemed to slow down. Like even it was thinking, did this kid just? My cheek was burning. Not just from the impact, but from the sheer audacity of it all. This wasn't a playful tap. This was a statement. This was Milo establishing dominance in a household where I apparently ranked somewhere between the family dog and the decorative vase nobody likes but keeps anyway. I stood there frozen, my brain trying to process what just happened while my face pulsed with the kind of heat you only feel when you're either extremely embarrassed or about to commit a felony. Milo stood in front of me, arms crossed, with this smirk that said he'd done it before and gotten away with it, which, let's be real, he probably had. Then came Rachel's voice from the kitchen doorway. And I swear to God, she was laughing. Not a nervous, oh no, my child just assaulted my husband laugh, but a genuine full-throated cackle like she just watched the funniest YouTube video of her life. He's only playing, she said, waving her hand dismissively like I was being dramatic for having a functioning nervous system. That registered pain. Only playing, right? Because nothing says playful bonding like getting smacked across the face by someone who still needs help tying his shoes. I looked at Rachel standing there in her yoga pants and oversized sweater, wine glass already in hand, even though it was barely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I realized something profound. I'd married someone who thought assault was adorable when her kid did it. Before I could respond, not that I was planning to, because what do you even say in that moment, Harper materialized on the couch like some teenage specter of judgment. She was leaning against the armrest with her phone in one hand, that signature Gen Z smirk plastered across her face. Go on, she said, her voice dripping with the kind of casual cruelty only 14-year-olds can master. Hit him back if you dare. Oh, so now it was a challenge, a test. Hit the kid and prove I'm some kind of monster, or don't hit the kid and prove I'm a pushover. Classic no-win scenario, like choosing between 2 expired milk cartons. Harper's eyes gleamed with anticipation, probably already drafting the TikTok caption, Step loses his mind. LOL hashtag drama hashtag toxic hashtag family content. I looked at Milo, then at Harper, then at Rachel, who was still smiling like we were in the middle of some heartwarming sitcom moment instead of what was clearly a hostage situation disguised as family bonding. My cheek throbbed. My pride was doing that thing where it packs its bags and checks Airbnb prices in different cities. Every fiber of my being wanted to say something, do something, anything to establish that hitting your stepfather is, not okay. But here's the thing about moments like these. You have 2 choices. You can explode right then and there. Become the bad guy. Give them all the ammunition they need to paint you as the villain at the next family gathering. Or you can smile. You can stay calm. You can let them think they've won while you quietly plan something so calculated, so perfectly executed that by the time they realize what's happened, it's already too late. So, I smiled. Not a big smile, not a fake one either. Just this small knowing curve of the lips that probably looks slightly unhinged if I'm being honest. It's all right, I said, my voice steady and calm, like I was discussing the weather instead of the fact that I'd just been physically assaulted in my own living room by someone who still believed in Santa Claus last year. The room shifted. I could feel it. Rachel's laugh caught in her throat. Harper's smirk faltered for just a second. Even Milo looked slightly uncertain, like maybe, just maybe, he poked the wrong bear. Because here's what they didn't understand. Nothing terrifies people more than a man who stays calm when he should be losing his mind. It's that eerie serial killer documentary energy that makes people wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, what box you're checking off in your mental revenge spreadsheet. I walked past all three of them, heading toward the kitchen to pour myself more coffee. The only honest relationship I had left in this house. Behind me, I heard Rachel clear her throat. That nervous little sound she makes when she realizes she might have miscalculated something. Harper went back to her phone, but quieter now. Milo just stood there, probably wondering why his greatest hit didn't get the reaction he wanted. As I stood at the counter pouring French roast into my favorite mug, the one that said "World's okayest stepdad" that Rachel bought as a joke, but I kept as evidence. I caught my reflection in the microwave door. My cheek was still red, my jaw tight. But my eyes had that look that you just activated my trap card look. They wanted to play. Fine, we'd play. But this game was going to be played by my rules now. And trust me, I've been studying the playbook for 2 years. Every dismissive comment, every eye roll. Every time Rachel chose her kid's bad behavior over basic respect, I'd been taking notes, mental notes, the kind that don't forget. I took a sip of my coffee, let the bitterness ground me, and smiled again, this time to myself. Because revenge isn't about acting immediately. It's about timing. It's about patience. It's about letting them get comfortable, letting them think you're broken in, letting them believe you'll just take it forever. And then when they least expect it, you remind them that the quiet ones, we're not quiet because we're weak. We're quiet because we're planning. Game on, family. Game on. That evening rolled around with all the grace of a garbage truck at 5 o'clock in the morning. You'd think after your kid slaps your husband across the face, there'd be some kind of family meeting, maybe an apology, perhaps even a consequence that didn't involve everyone pretending it was just another hilarious Tuesday. But no, Rachel acted like absolutely nothing had happened, which I was starting to realize was her superpower, the ability to erase reality with sheer willpower and Chardonnay. She emerged from our bedroom around 6 o'clock, freshly showered, hair blown out like she was about to film a shampoo commercial, wearing that cream-colored sweater she reserved for feeling myself days. She floated into the kitchen where I was already prepping dinner because apparently somewhere between "I do" and "your son assaulted me." I'd become the household chef. She poured herself a generous glass of white wine, the kind that costs $30 a bottle and tastes like regret with hints of oak, and settled onto one of our counter stools like a talk show host about to deliver a monologue. "You know what I love about Milo?" she said, swirling her wine like she was at a vineyard in Napa instead of our suburban kitchen that still smelled like the garlic I was mincing. She didn't wait for me to answer. This wasn't actually a conversation, just a one-woman show where I played the captive audience. His confidence. He's so confident for his age. Most kids are timid, you know, but not Milo. He just goes for what he wants. I paused mid-chop, my knife hovering over the cutting board, and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was dead serious. In Rachel's mind, her 10-year-old son smacking a grown man wasn't assault. It was leadership potential. It was confidence. It was the kind of go-getter attitude that Silicon Valley brothers put on their LinkedIn profiles right before their startups tank. And they move back in with their parents. "Yeah," I said slowly, resuming my chopping with perhaps a bit more force than necessary. Nothing says confidence like hitting someone who's trying to find the TV remote. Real CEO energy there. The sarcasm flew right over her head like a paper airplane in a hurricane. She just nodded enthusiastically, took another sip of her wine, and launched into this story about how Milo had apparently dominated at his soccer practice last week. Dominated like he was a UFC fighter instead of a kid who still couldn't remember to flush the toilet half the time. Harper wandered in around that point, earbuds in, phone glued to her hand like it was a vital organ she'd die without. She was wearing ripped jeans that probably cost more than my car payment and a crop top that said "Icon" in glittery letters. She grabbed a LaCroix from the fridge because God forbid anyone in this house drink regular water like a peasant, and leaned against the counter, scrolling through what I assumed was either TikTok or evidence of our society's decline. Probably both. Rachel turned to her with that mom voice that's trying way too hard to be both authoritative and cool. "Harper, sweetie, can you please be nice to your stepdad? He does a lot for this family." Harper's eyes didn't leave her phone, but she managed to roll them so hard I'm pretty sure I heard them complete a full rotation. It was like watching a skateboard trick, but with teenage disdain. "Sure, Mom, whatever." They whatever hung in the air like a fart at a funeral, acknowledged by no one, but felt by everyone. Rachel just smiled, apparently satisfied that she'd addressed the issue of basic human respect with all the effectiveness of a band-aid on a bullet wound, and went back to her wine. I turned back to the stove, stirring the pasta sauce I'd been working on for the better part of an hour. Homemade marinara because Rachel liked to tell her book club friends that I was such an amazing cook, which really meant he does all the cooking so I don't have to. Stepdad/chef/oceanal punching bag. That was my official title in this household, though it never appeared on any Mother's Day cards or family photos Rachel posted on Instagram with captions like #blessed, #family love, #grateful. Milo thundered down the stairs like a baby elephant having an existential crisis, his tablet blaring some YouTube video where people screamed at each other over video games. He threw himself into a chair at the dinner table, didn't wash his hands. I watched him not wash them, and immediately started complaining that he was starving like he'd just crossed the Sahara instead of spending the last 3 hours in his room playing Fortnite. Dinner was the usual circus. I served everyone while Rachel documented it for her Instagram story. Family dinner nights are everything. Spaghetti red heart sparkles, complete with that Valencia filter that made our mediocre kitchen look like something out of a home design magazine. Every time I passed her to refill the bread basket or grab more Parmesan, I caught her checking her reflection in her phone camera, adjusting her hair, making sure her angles were right. She took 14 photos of her pasta before she actually ate any of it. 14. I counted because at this point, documenting the insanity was the only thing keeping me sane. Milo ate like he was auditioning for a nature documentary. Specifically, the part where they show wild animals feeding, mouth open, food visible, sounds that shouldn't come from humans. It was like National Geographic Zoo at dinner edition, and I was both the zookeeper and the guy cleaning up after the exhibits. He talked with his mouth full, sprayed pasta sauce on the table, and when Rachel gently suggested he close his mouth while chewing, he just shrugged and kept going like she'd suggested he try breathing underwater. Harper picked at her food with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to eat cafeteria mystery meat, complained that the sauce was too tomatoey, which, yeah, that's generally how tomato sauce works, and spent most of dinner typing furiously on her phone. When Rachel asked who she was texting, Harper responded with, "Nobody." In that tone, that very clearly meant, everybody, and also, it's none of your business. But I'm going to make you feel guilty for asking. I sat there eating my own cooking, watching this dysfunctional dinner theater unfold like I was a guest star in a sitcom that had definitely jumped the shark. Rachel laughed at something Milo said. Something about another kid at school being dumb for not having the latest iPhone. And I realized something profound and slightly terrifying. She genuinely didn't see anything wrong with any of this. The slap from this afternoon already forgotten. The casual disrespect. Just kids being kids. The fact that I was basically an unpaid servant who occasionally got to sleep in the master bedroom. That was just marriage, baby. But here's the thing that nobody tells you about reaching your breaking point. It doesn't always feel like breaking. Sometimes it feels like clarity. Like someone just turned on the lights in a room you'd been stumbling through in the dark for years. As I sat there chewing my pasta and watching my wife take her 15th food photo while her son ate like a wood chipper and her daughter radioed her complaints to the International Tribunal of Teenage Injustice, I wasn't angry. I was inspired. There's something about being slapped by a child while your wife claps and calls it confidence that awakens a very specific type of calm vengeance. Not the hot, explosive kind where you flip tables and storm out. No, this was the cold, calculated kind. The kind where you smile and nod and keep cooking dinner while your brain starts running numbers, checking accounts, and reviewing exactly where your money goes every month. Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand, probably feeling generous after her second glass of wine. "Thank you for dinner, babe. You're the best." I squeezed back and smiled. Anything for family. And I meant it. I was about to do something very special for this family. And after Rachel had tucked Milo in while somehow making it sound like a heroic act worthy of a medal. And after Harper had locked herself in her room to do whatever teenagers do when they're definitely not doing homework. The house finally settled into something resembling peace. That blessed sacred silence that only comes when everyone else is unconscious and you can finally hear yourself think without someone asking you to pass the remote or complaining that the Wi-Fi is buffering. I grabbed my lukewarm coffee, my third cup of the day, because at this point, caffeine wasn't a beverage choice. It was a survival strategy, and headed to my home office. And when I say office, I'm being extremely generous. It was really just a converted coat closet that Rachel had let me have when we moved in together, like she was the landlord granting me a favor instead of my wife sharing a home we were both supposedly living in as equals. But hey, it was mine. My one corner of sanity in a house that felt increasingly like a reality show I never auditioned for. The room was barely big enough for a desk, a chair that squeaked whenever I shifted my weight, and a bookshelf that held a combination of financial planning books. I'd actually read and decorative novels Rachel had bought at Target to make it look sophisticated. There was also a plant on the corner of my desk, some leafy thing that I couldn't remember the name of, but was pretty sure was on life support. Its leaves were brown on the edges, drooping like it had given up on photosynthesis, and was just waiting for the sweet release of the compost bin. Honestly, same, buddy. Same. I settled into my chair, which greeted me with its usual groan of protest, and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my face in that unflattering blue glow that makes everyone look like they're either about to hack into the Pentagon or watch their 5th hour of Netflix. For a moment, I just sat there staring at my desktop background. A photo from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, back when Rachel still laughed at my jokes and her kids were theoretically someone else's problem for a week. We looked happy in that photo, tanned, smiling, holding tropical drinks with little umbrellas. That guy in the photo had no idea what was coming. Poor bastard. I clicked open my banking app because nothing says romantic Saturday night like reviewing your financial hemorrhaging in a closet. The login screen appeared. I typed in my password, Rachel Love 2023, because I'd set it up when I was still optimistic and hadn't yet learned that love doesn't conquer all. Sometimes it just empties your checking account. And waited for my accounts to load. There it was. My checking account, my savings account, and the credit card I'd gotten specifically for family expenses, which really meant expenses for Rachel's family that she somehow never had cash for when the bills came. I clicked on the scheduled payments tab, and there it was, sitting there like a ticking time bomb of financial responsibility. The recurring payment for Milo and Harper's private school tuition. St. Augustine Academy, the best school in the district, according to Rachel, the place where kids wore uniforms that cost more than my entire wardrobe, and parents drove Teslas to pick up like they were in a parade of insufferable wealth. Tuition was $28,000 per kid per year. That's $56,000 annually for those of you keeping score at home. $56,000 for 2 kids who couldn't be bothered to say thank you if their lives depended on it. For 2 years, 2 full years, I'd been quietly footing this bill. Not because Rachel couldn't contribute. She had her own income from her consulting business, which, as far as I could tell, involved her drinking coffee with other women who also called themselves consultants and occasionally posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn. But whenever tuition rolled around, she'd get this pained look on her face and talk about cash flow issues and how she'd totally get the next one, which we both knew was code for you're going to pay for this because if you don't, you're not a real man or a real father figure or whatever guilt trip works best today. And I'd paid it every semester like clockwork because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You support their kids. You invest in their future. You sacrifice your own financial goals so that Milo can attend a school where he learns Latin, but not basic manners. And Harper can network with other teenagers whose parents think a Honda Accord is what poor people drive. Rachel loved bragging about it. I'd heard her on the phone with her friends, her voice all sing-songy and proud. Oh yes, Milo absolutely loves St. Augustine's. The teachers are incredible and the facilities to die for. We're just so blessed. We're blessed. We like it was a team effort, like she'd done anything besides show up to parent-teacher conferences in designer jeans and nod approvingly while I signed the check. Never once, not once had she said, my husband pays for it. Or, we're lucky he's so generous. Or even, thank God for that guy in the closet office who works his ass off while my kids treat him like the help. Nope. Just we're blessed. Like divine intervention had opened the gates of private education instead of my direct deposit hitting every other Friday. I stared at that scheduled payment on my screen. Next installment due in 1 week, $5,200. That was the monthly payment plan I'd set up because dropping $28,000 all at once felt like getting punched in the kidney by a loan officer. My cursor hovered over the payment details and I felt this strange calm wash over me. The kind of calm you feel when you're about to make a decision that will absolutely cause chaos but feels cosmically correct. I could almost hear my late father's voice in my head. Dad had been a practical man, a plumber who'd built his business from nothing and taught me that respect was earned, not bought. He died 3 years ago right before I met Rachel. And sometimes I wondered what he'd say about this whole situation. I had a pretty good idea, actually. He'd probably look at me with those bushy eyebrows raised and say something like, son, the best revenge doesn't shout. It deducts. Dad was big on financial consequences. He believed that money talked louder than words. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was close your wallet and walk away. People don't change because you yell at them. He told me once while we were fixing a sink in some McMansion where the owner had spent more on bathroom fixtures than Dad made in a year. They change when their comfort gets disrupted. When the gravy train stops running, My cursor moved to the cancel recurring payment button. It was just sitting there red and inviting like the nuclear launch button, except instead of starting World War II, it would just start World War Me. One click, that's all it would take. One click to stop the financial bleeding. One click to introduce my stepkids to the concept of consequences. One click to remind Rachel that we're blessed because someone is actually doing the blessing and that someone is currently sitting in a closet at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night questioning every life choice that led to this moment. I thought about Milo's face this afternoon. That smirk right after he'd slapped me. I thought about Harper's challenge. Hit him back if you dare. I thought about Rachel's laugh. That dismissive, aren't kids adorable laugh that completely disregarded the fact that I was a human being with feelings and a face that still slightly hurt. I thought about dinner, about being the unpaid chef, an emotional support animal, an ATM, all rolled into one convenient stepdad package. And then I thought about that scheduled payment sitting there like a subscription to my own disrespect. $5,200 a month to ensure that two kids who didn't respect me could continue attending a school where they'd learn to disrespect me with better vocabulary. You're blessed. All right, I whispered to the empty room, my voice barely audible over the hum of my laptop fan about to be blessed with a lesson. I clicked the button. The screen asked me to confirm, "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. Click. Payment canceled. Just like that. 2 years of financial martyrdom ended with a mouse click. No explosion, no dramatic music, just a simple confirmation message. And the sudden, beautiful lightness of knowing that next month that $5,200 would stay exactly where it belonged, in my account. Peace returned to my soul like a bird coming home to roost. I sat back in my squeaky chair, took a sip of my cold coffee, and smiled at my dying plant. "Buddy," I said to it. "I think we're both about to get better." Sunday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a marching band, which is to say, Rachel's alarm went off at 7:30 a.m. playing some acoustic indie song about finding yourself that made me want to find the snooze button and press it until next Tuesday. She bolted upright like she'd been electrocuted, immediately grabbed her phone because heaven forbid she missed any overnight notifications from people she hadn't talked to since high school and announced to the ceiling, "It's breakfast content day." I should probably explain that Rachel had recently decided she was going to be an influencer. Not like a real influencer with actual followers or sponsorships or any measurable success, but the kind who posts inspirational quotes over pictures of her coffee and tags them with 47 hashtags, including #BossBabe, #Merneur, and my personal favorite #AuthenticLiving. Her Instagram bio read, "Mama, wife, wellness warrior, cherry blossom sparkles." Which was hilarious because the only battle she fought regularly was with the self-checkout at Target. This particular Sunday, she decided we were going to have a family breakfast moment that she could photograph for her 847 followers, most of whom were either her relatives, bots, or people who'd accidentally followed her back in 2019 and forgot to unfollow. She'd been planning this all week, which I knew because she'd made a Pinterest board titled Aesthetic Breakfast, and had made 3 separate trips to Home Goods to find the perfect rustic serving platter. By 8 a.m., she'd transformed our kitchen into what I can only describe as a Food Network fever dream. There were pancakes arranged in an artistic stack, fresh berries artfully scattered across the table like edible confetti, a picture of orange juice that caught the morning light just right, and those tiny glass bottles of maple syrup that cost $9 each and tasted exactly like the $4 stuff but looked better on camera. She'd even put flowers in a vase. Actual fresh flowers that she'd made me drive to the floors to get yesterday because apparently the flowers from the grocery store weren't authentic enough. She was wearing her designated casual influencer outfit. High-waisted jeans, a white t-shirt tucked in just so, and that denim apron she'd bought specifically for photos and had literally never used for actual cooking. Her hair was in a messy bun that had taken her 20 minutes to make look like it took 30 seconds. And she'd done the full makeup routine while claiming she was going for a natural no-makeup look. The result was that she looked ready for a magazine photo shoot about farmhouse living, which was ironic since the closest she'd ever been to a farm was the Whole Foods produce section. "Okay, everyone, gather around," she called out, her voice hitting that weird performative octave that people use when they're talking to both their family and their future audience simultaneously. "Let's get some great shots before the food gets cold." Milo came thundering down the stairs, wearing his pajamas inside out. I could see the tag flapping around in the back and sporting what I'm pretty sure was yesterday's syrup in his hair. Harper followed about 5 minutes later, looking like she'd just been exhumed from a tomb, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, her eyes barely open, and her phone already in her hand like it was surgically attached. "Harper, sweetie, can you maybe put on something with color?" Rachel asked, her smile tight as she frantically adjusted the flower vase for the 14th time. "And maybe brush your hair just for the photos." Harper looked at her mother like she'd suggested she donate a kidney. "Mom, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Nobody cares." "I care." Rachel chirped, her influencer voice straining slightly. "And my followers care. We're sharing our beautiful family breakfast tradition." "We don't have a family breakfast tradition," Harper mumbled. But she was already trudging back upstairs, probably to change into the minimum acceptable outfit that would get her mother off her back while still communicating maximum teenage rebellion. I stood at the counter pouring myself coffee, real coffee, not the decorative kind Rachel had positioned near the flowers, and watched this circus unfold with the detached amusement of someone who just canceled $56,000 in annual payments and was now essentially watching previews for the movie that was about to start. Rachel positioned her phone on the tripod she bought specifically for these moments. "Okay, everyone smile. Natural smiles like we're happy to be together." Milo immediately made a face like he was being tortured. Harper returned wearing a slightly different hoodie that was still gray and still communicated that she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Rachel snapped about 30 photos in rapid succession. Each one probably indistinguishable from the last, while I stood slightly to the side, coffee in hand, waiting for this performance to end so I could actually eat. "Perfect. Okay, now let's do a candid one where everyone's laughing." "At what?" Harper asked, her tone suggesting that she found nothing in the observable universe remotely funny. "Just laugh. Pretend something's funny." We all fake laughed. It sounded like a group of hostages trying to convince their captors they were having a good time. Rachel checked the photos, frowned, deleted half of them, and made us do it again and again. By the fourth take, even Milo looked tired, which was saying something because that kid had the energy of a squirrel that had just discovered energy drinks. Finally, we were allowed to actually sit down and eat. Milo immediately grabbed the syrup bottle and proceeded to drown his pancakes like he was trying to create a maple swimming pool. Harper picked at her berries with the enthusiasm of someone defusing a bomb. Rachel was already editing photos on her phone, applying filters that made our kitchen look like it existed in some sun-drenched dimension where families were actually happy and nobody's stepson had committed assault less than 24 hours ago. I cut into my pancakes, which were actually pretty good because I'd made the batter yesterday while Rachel was planning her phone angles, and savored the quiet chaos. This was my last breakfast watching them take all of this for granted. The expensive organic berries, the fancy syrup, the whole performative perfection of it all because that tuition money I just freed up, that was going to change some things around here. Milo, in true Milo fashion, was eating like he was training for a competitive sport where table manners were explicitly forbidden, mouth open, chewing loudly, occasionally making sound effects. At one point, he flung syrup at the dog. We had a golden retriever named Biscuit, who Rachel had gotten during her "I need something to love me unconditionally" phase, and the dog, being a dog, happily licked it off the floor. "Milo, buddy, maybe try to keep the syrup on your plate," Rachel suggested absently, not looking up from her phone where she was probably writing a caption about cherishing simple moments or some other inspirational garbage. Harper, meanwhile, was complaining about the Wi-Fi. "Oh my god, this internet is so slow. Like, slower than poor people's connections. I can't even load Instagram. How am I supposed to exist like this?" I paused mid-chew. "Slower than poor people's connections." That's what she said. This 14-year-old who'd never paid a bill in her life, never worried about where her next meal was coming from, never had to choose between wants and needs, just casually threw out class's commentary while eating $20 berries on a Sunday morning. I set down my fork carefully and took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. "You might want to enjoy that school breakfast while you can," I muttered. Just loud enough to technically be heard, but quiet enough that it could be missed. Nobody noticed. Rachel was typing furiously on her phone, probably responding to the 3 people who'd already liked her breakfast post. Harper was aggressively refreshing her Instagram feed like her life depended on it. Milo was seeing how many pancake pieces he could stuff in his mouth at once, because why not turn breakfast into a choking hazard? Rachel suddenly looked up from her phone and smiled at me. One of those warm, affectionate smiles that reminded me why I'd fallen for her in the first place. Back before I realized that the woman I'd dated and the woman I'd married were 2 different people operating under the same name, she got up, walked over, and kissed my cheek. The same cheek her son had slapped yesterday, which added a layer of irony so thick you could cut it with a knife. "You're so quiet these days," she said sweetly, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Everything okay?" I looked up at her. This woman who'd laughed when her kid hit me, who was currently more concerned with Instagram likes than actual family connection, who thought we're blessed, was an acceptable substitute for, "Thank you for paying for everything." I smiled back, the kind of smile that probably looked genuine if you weren't paying attention, but had undertones that could sink a ship. "Oh, I'm just reflecting." I replied, taking another sip of my coffee like a villain mid-plot, which, let's be honest, I kind of was at this point. She patted my shoulder, seemingly satisfied with that non-answer, and went back to her phone to add more hashtags, probably hashtag family #blessed #gratitude, completely unaware that she was about to learn the actual definition of those words. If sarcasm burned calories, I'd be shredded by now. Hell, I'd be a skeleton. I'd be so fit that personal trainers would ask me for tips. But instead, I just sat there finishing my pancakes, watching my wife curate our fake perfect life for strangers on the internet while her kids embodied everything wrong with entitled youth. The bomb was ticking. They just couldn't hear it yet, but they would. Oh, they definitely would. The next few days pass like that awkward silence after someone tells a joke that absolutely bombs. You know something's wrong. The tension is there, but everyone's pretending everything's fine while internally screaming. Except in this case, I was the only one who knew the punchline was coming. And let me tell you, the anticipation was delicious. I'd slipped into what I can only describe as performance mode. I became the obedient husband, the stepfather who tries, the guy who does everything without complaint. I cooked dinners like I was auditioning for a cooking show nobody asked for. I did the laundry, folded it with those neat little military corners Rachel loved, and even separated the darks from the lights like I actually cared whether Milo's soccer jersey stayed vibrant. I took out the trash before it was full, unloaded the dishwasher without being asked, and even cleaned the bathroom, including that weird mildew spot behind the toilet that everyone pretended didn't exist. Rachel ate it up. "You've been so helpful lately," she said one evening while I was scrubbing a pan she'd left soaking in the sink for 3 days, which is code for "I'm never cleaning this." "Good luck." She wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "I feel like we're really in a good place right now." I smiled at the soapy water. "Yeah, babe. Really good place." What I didn't say was that the good place she was feeling was actually the eye of the hurricane. That deceptive calm right before everything goes sideways and people start checking their insurance policies. But why ruin the moment? Let her enjoy it. Let them all enjoy it. The school's accounting office was busy printing a very special letter right now. And that letter was going to arrive in a neat little white envelope with the St. Augustine Academy crest on it. And when it did, this good place was going to become a war zone. Tuesday evening, Rachel's mother stopped by because apparently my life wasn't complicated enough without adding Brenda to the mix. Brenda was one of those women who'd aged into that specific brand of wealthy suburban grandmother. Perfectly highlighted hair, expensive athleisure wear that she'd never actually exercised in. And opinions about everything that she delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong about anything ever, even though she was wrong about most things constantly. She arrived carrying a Whole Foods bag full of organic snacks for her babies, meaning Milo and Harper, not Rachel and definitely not me, and wearing yoga pants that cost more than my car insurance. She swept into our house like she owned it, which she kind of did in spirit since Rachel still called her for advice on everything from what color to paint the bathroom to whether Mercury being in retrograde was why the Wi-Fi was slow. "Oh, there's my favorite son-in-law," Brenda announced. Even though I was her only son-in-law, which made the superlative pretty meaningless. She air-kissed both my cheeks. I don't know when that became a thing we did, but apparently it was, and then immediately turned to Rachel. "Where are my angels?" The angels were currently upstairs. Milo was playing video games at a volume that suggested he was trying to communicate with aircraft. And Harper was doing whatever Harper did, which probably involved taking 47 selfies and complaining about how the lighting in her room wasn't Instagram worthy. Rachel called them down and they came stampeding like someone had announced free iPhones. Brenda showered them with attention and organic granola bars that were probably gluten-free, dairy-free, joy-free, and tasted like cardboard that had been blessed by a wellness influencer. The kids grabbed their treats and immediately retreated back upstairs, their obligation to Grandma fulfilled for the week. We all settled in the living room, me on the couch, Rachel and Brenda on the love seat, because apparently they needed to be close enough to gossip in that stage whisper way that's meant to be heard. I was pretending to read something on my phone, but was actually just staring at the same email about a sale at Home Depot while listening to their conversation. "Rachel, honey, you look tired," Brenda said, which is grandmother code for, "You look terrible, but I'm going to say it nicely. Are you getting enough help around here?" Rachel glanced at me, and for a second, I thought she might actually acknowledge that I did literally everything around here except breathe for her, but no. Instead, she sighed dramatically and said, "Oh, you know how it is. The kids keep me so busy. Milo has soccer and tutoring. Harper's got her friend drama, and there's just so much to manage." Brenda nodded sympathetically like Rachel had just described surviving a natural disaster instead of having a pretty standard suburban existence where the biggest crisis was deciding which filter to use on Instagram. You're such a saint dealing with all of that and raising them practically alone. I looked up from my phone. Practically alone. Brenda turned to me with this patronizing smile that probably worked great on her bridge club, but made me want to test whether expensive yoga pants were flammable. Oh, you know what I mean, dear. Single motherhood is so hard, even when there's a partner. You married a saint. You know that Rachel could have any man she wanted, and she chose you. You're very lucky. There it was. The reminder that I should be grateful that Rachel, in all her divorced with 2 kids, glory, had deigned to marry me, and I should wake up every day thanking my lucky stars that she'd settled for a guy who worked in it and didn't drive a BMW. Never mind that I'd walked into a ready-made family and immediately started bankrolling their lifestyle. Never mind that I'd put my own dreams of early retirement on hold to pay for a private school that taught Milo the Latin word for ungrateful, but not how to use basic manners. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Oh, I know exactly how lucky I am, Brenda. She beamed, completely missing the edge in my voice. Then she launched into this whole thing about how wonderful it was that I let Rachel's kids walk all over me. Except she phrased it differently. You're so patient with them. Not every man would be okay with his wife putting her children first, but you just let them be themselves, and that's beautiful. Really, you're a saint, too. Rachel laughed. Actually laughed and clinked her wine glass against her mother's like they just toasted something profound instead of casually insulting me. Mom's right. You're so easygoing. Most guys would have way more ego about things. I nodded slowly, taking a sip of my beer. Domestic because God forbid I spend money on craft beer when there were private school tuitions to pay. Oh wait. Oh, Brenda, they're not walking, I said carefully, my voice light and conversational. They're sprinting. Both women laughed, thinking I was joking, making some self-deprecating comment about being overwhelmed by family life. They had no idea I was talking about the future, the very near future, where Milo and Harper would be sprinting to the principal's office at whatever public school ended up accepting them. Mid-semester, Brenda stayed for another excruciating hour, during which she managed to compliment Rachel 47 times, asked me twice what I did for work, like she forgot every time she saw me, and somehow work in 3 separate mentions of her friend Carol's son, who was a doctor. A doctor, in case I missed it. Because apparently every conversation with your mother-in-law needs to include a reminder that you're not living up to some imaginary standard set by Carol's imaginary perfect son. After she finally left, taking her expensive yoga pants and her backhanded compliments with her, the house settled back into its usual chaos. Harper emerged from her room to practice what she called her influencer walk in front of the hallway mirror. I watched from the kitchen as she strutted back and forth, phone in hand, filming herself from various angles like she was preparing for Fashion Week instead of just walking down a hallway in suburban America. Looking good, Harper, I called out. She glanced at me, surprised that I'd said anything. Thanks, she muttered, then went back to her video, probably already composing a caption about confidence and authenticity. Milo, meanwhile, decided that the living room was the perfect place for indoor soccer. Despite having an entire backyard and a bedroom the size of most people's apartments, he grabbed a foam ball and started dribbling it around the furniture like he was Messi training for the World Cup. I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich, turkey and Swiss, nothing fancy, just trying to eat in peace when I heard it crash. That specific sound of something expensive hitting the floor and losing the fight. I walked into the living room to find my reading lamp. The one I bought myself last Christmas, the one with the brass base that actually looked decent in pieces on the floor. The bulb had shattered, the shade was dented, and Milo was standing there with his ball, looking about as remorseful as a cat who'd just knocked over a vase on purpose. Oops, he said, not making eye contact. Rachel came down the stairs, took one look at the scene, and shrugged. He's expressive. Expressive? My lamp was in pieces because her son couldn't grasp the revolutionary concept of don't play ball in the house. And her response was that he's expressive. I stared at the broken lamp, then at Milo, then at Rachel, and something clicked, not anger. I was past anger. This was something else. This was clarity. Yes, I said slowly, bending down to pick up a piece of broken glass. So was Napoleon. Didn't end well either. Rachel blinked at me. What? Nothing, babe. I'll clean this up. And I did. I cleaned up the broken lamp, swept up the glass, and threw it all away while Milo went back upstairs unpunished. And Rachel went back to whatever she was doing, which was probably posting about family values on Facebook. That night, lying in bed while Rachel scrolled through her phone, I smiled at the ceiling. The envelope was coming. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. But it was coming. And when it did, we'd see how expressive everyone felt when their private school paradise came crashing down just like my lamp. Except unlike the lamp, I had no intention of cleaning up that mess. Saturday rolled around again, and I woke up with what I can only describe as misplaced optimism. You know that feeling when you think maybe, just maybe, you can fix something that's clearly beyond repair? Like when your check engine light's been on for 6 months and you think adding premium gas might solve it. That was me lying in bed at 7 a.m. convincing myself that I could bond with Milo. That maybe despite all evidence to the contrary, there was a decent kid under all that entitlement and violence. Rachel was still asleep, her face mask half peeled off and stuck to the pillow. One of those $20 Korean beauty masks she bought in bulk from some website that promised eternal youth, but mostly just made her look like a serial killer's victim. Harper was probably in her room, either sleeping or pretending to sleep, so nobody would ask her to do anything productive. And Milo was probably already awake, plotting his next assault or figuring out what household item he could destroy next. I decided I was going to try something radical, actual bonding. Revolutionary, I know. I'd bake cookies with the kid. Everyone loves cookies, right? It's basically impossible to be a terrible person while making chocolate chip cookies. That's just science. Or at least that's what I told myself while putting on sweatpants and heading downstairs to our kitchen that was definitely not equipped for a baking show, but would have to do. I got out all the ingredients, flour, sugar, butter, chocolate chips, the whole 9 yards. I even found Rachel's fancy vanilla extract that she'd bought at some artisan market and never used because actually cooking would interfere with her photographing food she didn't make. I was measuring out flour when Milo appeared in the doorway looking suspicious like I just offered him candy from a van. "Hey champ," I said, going for enthusiastic, but probably landing somewhere around desperate used car salesman. "Want to bake some cookies with me?" He stood there in his pajamas. Spider-Man ones that were getting too small, but Rachel kept making him wear because she thought they were adorable and gave me this look like I just asked him to donate a kidney. His hair was sticking up in every direction. He had sleep crust in the corners of his eyes and he was holding his tablet like it was a security blanket. "Cookies," he said, his voice thick with skepticism that seemed way too advanced for a 10-year-old. "Yeah, you know the round things that taste good. We mix stuff, put it in the oven, try not to burn down the house." Classic Saturday activity, he shrugged, which in preteen communication could mean anything from sure. Why not to I'd rather eat glass, but I'm bored enough to consider this. I decided to interpret it optimistically and gestured to the counter. "Cool. Come on over. You can crack the eggs." He shuffled over, set his tablet down, but kept it in view because, God forbid he disconnect from the digital world for more than 30 seconds, and picked up an egg like it was a live grenade. To his credit, he actually managed to crack it without getting shell everywhere, which was more than I'd expected, honestly. We worked in relative silence for a few minutes. I measured. He dumped things into the bowl. I mixed. He watched. It was almost peaceful. Almost the kind of almost that makes you forget you're in a situation comedy written by someone who hates you. "Why are we doing this?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife through butter. Or in this case, like a spatula through cookie dough. "What do you mean this?" He gestured vaguely at the mixing bowl. "The cookie thing. Mom says you only do stuff like this because you're bored and old." I stopped mid-stir. The spatula frozen in the bowl. My brain doing that thing where it tries to process something so casually cruel that it takes a second to register. "She said that." "Huh?" "Yeah." He said it so matter-of-factly like he was telling me the weather forecast or what he had for lunch. No malice, no awareness that he just dropped a conversational bomb. Just a kid repeating what his mom said, probably word for word with all the innocent cruelty of someone who doesn't understand the weight of what they're saying. I resumed stirring, focusing on the dough because looking at Milo right then would have revealed something on my face that I wasn't ready to show. "Well," I said carefully, keeping my voice light. "Boredom's cheaper than therapy." He grinned at that. Actually grinned like I'd said something funny instead of something that was 50% joke and 50% cry for help. We kept mixing, adding the chocolate chips, forming the dough into little balls, and placing them on the cookie sheet. He was actually getting into it. His tongue sticking out in concentration as he tried to make each ball the perfect size. "These are going to be good," he said. And for a second, just a second, he sounded like a normal kid, excited about cookies, not thinking about iPads or video games or slapping people. Just a kid who wanted cookies. Then he said it. "Mom says, you don't have real money, just savings." The cookie dough ball I was holding squished between my fingers. Not on purpose. My hand just clenched involuntarily. Muscle memory from every time someone said something so stunningly offensive that your body reacts before your brain can catch up. I looked down at the dough oozing between my knuckles and thought about how this was probably a metaphor for my life right now. I carefully shaped the dough back into a ball, placed it on the sheet, and wiped my hands on a towel. Is that right? Aha. She was talking to Grandma on the phone. Said, you're good at saving, but you're not like rich. Not like Harper's real dad was. And there it was, the cherry on top of the sarcastic sundae. Not only was I apparently boring, old, and financially inadequate, but I was being compared to Rachel's ex-husband, the guy who cheated on her with his dental hygienist and then moved to Arizona without paying child support for 2 years. That guy, I was being unfavorably compared to that guy because apparently he'd had money before he decided that supporting his children was optional. I looked at the cookie dough, then at Milo, who was completely oblivious to the fact that he just nuked any remaining goodwill I might have had toward this family. He was just standing there licking chocolate chips off his fingers, waiting for me to respond like he'd commented on the weather instead of casually destroying my dignity in our kitchen on a Saturday morning. Well, I said, sliding the cookie sheet into the oven and setting the timer. Your mom's right about one thing. I do have savings. And you know what's great about savings, Milo? He looked up at me, curious. What? You can choose what to do with them. He nodded like this was some profound wisdom I was sharing, not a thinly veiled threat about his entire future. Cool. We stood there for a moment, the oven warming up, filling the kitchen with that promise of baked goods that almost made everything seem normal. Almost. Milo grabbed his tablet and started playing some game where cartoon characters screamed at each other. I leaned against the counter and watched him. This kid who had no idea that his entire life was about to change because his mother couldn't keep her mouth shut about finances and because he'd been raised to think that insulting people was just casual conversation. The timer had 12 minutes on it. In 12 minutes, we'd have cookies. And in probably less than 12 business days, we'd have a crisis when that letter from St. Augustine Academy arrived. The math was all coming together beautifully, like a recipe for disaster that I'd followed to perfection. You know what, buddy? I said, watching him tap away at his tablet, completely absorbed in his digital world, completely unaware of the real-world consequences that were baking just as surely as those cookies. What? He mumbled, not looking up. You're about to learn what happens when savings stops saving you. He didn't hear me. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. The oven timer was counting down. The cookies were baking. And somewhere in a school administrative office, a letter with our name on it was waiting to be mailed. When the timer dinged, we pulled out perfect chocolate chip cookies. Golden brown gooey in the center, exactly the way they should be. Milo ate 3 of them right away, declared them pretty good, and then went back upstairs with his tablet, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the rest of the batch and my thoughts. I ate a cookie. It was delicious. Perfectly balanced sweetness, just enough salt, chocolate chips in every bite. I'd nailed the recipe. Too bad I couldn't say the same about this family. But hey, at least the cookies turned out right. That was one more success than this marriage was going to have once that envelope arrived. I smiled at the cooling rack full of cookies and whispered to myself, buddy, you're about to learn what happens when savings stops saving you. The house was quiet except for the sound of video games upstairs and my own breathing. The calm before the storm tastes a lot like chocolate chip cookies. Apparently, who knew? It was a Thursday. One of those perfect Thursday mornings that tricks you into thinking the universe might actually be on your side for once. The sun was doing that thing where it streams through the windows at just the right angle, making everything look like a home decor commercial. Birds were chirping outside like they'd been hired by Disney. The smell of pancakes was drifting up from the kitchen where Rachel was doing her morning routine. And for a brief delusional moment, you could almost forget that you lived in a house where respect went to die. I was upstairs getting dressed for work. Business casual, which is corporate speak for we don't respect you enough to let you wear jeans, but we also don't respect you enough to call it professional attire. When I heard it, the mail truck, that distinctive rumble of the USPS vehicle that delivers everything from credit card offers to divorce papers, too. In this case, karmic justice wrapped in a white envelope. My heart did this weird skip thing. Not a heart attack skip, more like a here we go skip. The kind of anticipatory flutter you get right before a roller coaster drops or right before you hit send on an email you know is going to cause chaos. I finished buttoning my shirt, took my time with my tie, navy blue with thin silver stripes, very professional, very I'm a guy who makes calculated decisions, and headed downstairs. Rachel was in full morning mode, which meant she was simultaneously making breakfast, checking her phone, and planning her day out loud to nobody in particular. She was wearing leggings and an oversized sweatshirt that said Mama Bear and rhinestones because apparently that was a personality trait. Now, her hair was in a top knot. She had her glasses on instead of contacts, and she was flipping pancakes with one hand while scrolling through Instagram with the other. A multitasking feat that would be impressive if it wasn't so depressing. "Morning, babe," she called out when she saw me. Her voice all sing-songy like we were in a sitcom where everyone loved each other and nobody was secretly plotting financial revenge. "Pancakes are almost ready. I'm trying that new recipe I found on Pinterest. You know, the one with the knock the mailman right on schedule. Beautiful, punctual, government-employed mailman bringing the reckoning right to our doorstep." "Oh, mail's here," Rachel said like this was notable instead of a daily occurrence. She set down her phone. Miracle and wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Can you grab it, hon? My hands are all pancake." "Why?" "Sure thing," I said. Probably a little too quickly with a little too much enthusiasm. I walked to the front door like a man on a mission because this was it. The moment I'd been waiting for since I clicked that cancel payment button in my closet office. Christmas morning for petty people. The Super Bowl of consequences. I opened the door and there it was. A neat stack of mail held together with a rubber band. Bills, junk, a catalog for furniture Rachel would look at and never buy. And right there, right on top, like it knew it was the star of the show, a crisp white envelope with the St. Augustine Academy crest embossed in gold on the corner. I grabbed the mail, closed the door, and took a deep breath. This was happening. This was actually happening. I walked back to the kitchen with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you're holding a live grenade and everyone else thinks it's a gift basket. "Anything good?" Rachel asked, still focused on her pancakes, still completely oblivious to the fact that her entire morning, hell, her entire week was about to implode. "Let's see," I said casually, flipping through the stack like I was checking baseball scores instead of holding the nuclear codes to our family dynamics. "Bill, junk, more junk. Coupon for that pizza place you like." And I paused, holding up the St. Augustine envelope. "Something from the school." Rachel glanced over, still not concerned. Why would she be? As far as she knew, everything was fine. The tuition was paid. Her kids were getting their elite education. Life was blessed. We were blessed. She was blessed for having married someone who quietly funded her children's future while she took credit. And her mother insulted me. "Oh, must be the new terms update," she said cheerfully, plating the pancakes with the kind of care she usually reserved for Instagram photos. "They always send those fancy letters. Probably about the spring fundraiser or something. Can you open it?" "Sure," I said, grabbing a knife from the counter. I slid it under the flap of the envelope, taking my time, savoring the moment like a fine wine or a perfectly cooked steak. The paper made that satisfying tearing sound as I pulled out the letter. Heavy cardstock, official letterhead, the kind of paper that costs more than regular paper because it needs to communicate importance. I unfolded it slowly. Read the first line, then the second. My face remained completely neutral, which was an acting performance worthy of an Oscar because inside I was doing backflips. "What's it say?" Rachel asked, still not looking up, still arranging pancakes like she was competing in some breakfast Olympics. I cleared my throat. It's interesting." That got her attention. She looked up, spatula still in hand, her smile starting to falter around the edges. "Interesting how well," I said, holding up the letter so I could read it properly. Really milked the moment. "You know it says here, 'Dear Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, this letter is to inform you that we have not received payment for the fall semester tuition for students Milo Henderson and Harper Chun. As of today's date, your account is past due in the amount of $28,000 with an additional late fee of $500. Please remit payment immediately to avoid enrollment consequences.'" The kitchen went silent, like horror movie silent. The kind of silent where you can hear your own heartbeat and maybe someone's soul leaving their body. Rachel's spatula clattered onto the counter. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish trying to understand calculus. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I kept reading. Really committing to the performance now. It also says, failure to pay within 10 business days will result in the students being withdrawn from enrollment and their records being held until the balance is settled. I looked up at her, my expression perfectly neutral. "Huh, that's weird." "Weird?" Her voice cracked like she'd been gargling gravel. She snatched the letter from my hands, her eyes scanning the page like maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But no, there it was. Printed in official black ink on expensive cardstock. Unpaid tuition notice in bold letters at the top. Her face went through about 17 different expressions in 5 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, panic, anger, more panic, maybe a brief stop at denial and then landing solidly on what I can only describe as barely contained hysteria. "This has to be a mistake. This has to be we always pay on time. You always," she stopped, her brain clearly trying to connect dots that were suddenly appearing in her reality. Did you forget to pay the tuition? I leaned against the counter, picked up a piece of bacon from the plate she'd prepared, perfectly crispy, actually pretty good, and took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed, looked her dead in the eye with the kind of calm that serial killers probably have right before they explain their master plan. No, I said simply. I didn't forget. She blinked once, twice. Her brain was buffering, trying to load this new information. You didn't forget? Nope. Then what happened? Why didn't they get the payment? Did the bank make a mistake? Did the automatic payment not go through? I set down the bacon, brushed off my hands, and delivered the line I'd been practicing in my head for weeks. Rachel, there was no mistake. I canceled it. The words hung in the air like smoke from a building that was definitely absolutely 100% on fire. Rachel just stood there, the letter trembling in her hands, her eyes wide, her mouth forming words that weren't quite coming out yet. Upstairs, I heard movement. Harper's door opening. Milo's feet hitting the floor. They were coming down for breakfast, completely unaware that their world had just shifted on its axis. I took another piece of bacon, popped it in my mouth, and waited for the explosion. 3, 2, 1, you what? And there it was. The detonation I'd been waiting for. Rachel's voice hitting decibels that probably violated noise ordinances. Her face turning that specific shade of red that suggested her blood pressure was having its own personal crisis. Thursday morning, perfect sunshine, birds chirping, pancakes burning on the stove that Rachel had completely forgotten about. And me standing in the kitchen eating bacon, watching my carefully planned chaos unfold exactly as I designed it. Best Thursday ever. Rachel's face went through more color changes than a mood ring at a rave. Red to white to purple to some shade that I'm pretty sure doesn't exist in nature. Her hands were shaking so hard the letter was rattling like a tambourine. And I could actually see her trying to reboot her entire understanding of reality in real time. You what? She repeated, her voice strangled like she was being choked by her own disbelief. I picked up my coffee, still hot, still perfect, and took a leisurely sip before answering. No rush. We had all morning. Well, I had all morning. Rachel had a crisis to manage. But that wasn't really my problem anymore, was it? Cancelled, I repeated, my voice calm and even like I was explaining how to work the TV remote instead of detonating her entire worldview. I cancelled the tuition payment. Turns out private education doesn't teach respect. So, I'm cutting the budget for entitlement. Her mouth opened and closed several times. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was practicing for a goldfish impression. You can't just, that's their education. That's their future. Well, I said, setting down my coffee and straightening my tie. Maybe their future should have included learning that actions have consequences. Or at the very least not slapping the guy who's paying $48,000 a year for their fancy uniforms and Latin classes. This is about the slap. Rachel's voice hit a pitch that probably shattered glass somewhere in the neighborhood. Are you serious right now? You're ruining my children's education because Milo was playing around. Playing around? I nodded slowly like I was considering this. Right. Is that what we're calling assault now? Playing around? Good to know. I'll make sure to tell the next guy who gets hit by a 10-year-old that it's all just fun and games. That's when Harper appeared at the bottom of the stairs still in her pajamas, designer once naturally. That probably cost more than some people's rent with her phone already recording because of course she was recording. This was prime TikTok content for her. Drama, family dysfunction, all the ingredients for going viral among other teenagers who thought therapy was just a meme. What's going on? Harper asked, but her tone suggested she already knew this was going to be good. Her thumb was hovering over her phone screen, ready to capture every moment of this domestic implosion. Rachel whirled on her, the letter still clutched in her hand like evidence at a crime scene. Your stepfather, she spat the word like it was poison, has decided to stop paying for your school. Both of you, you're being kicked out because he canceled the tuition. Harper's face went pale, like vampire pale, like all the blood just evacuated her body and filed for asylum somewhere else. Her phone nearly slipped from her hand. Nearly, but not quite, because teenagers would rather lose a limb than drop their phones. What? Harper shrieked. And there it was. That same frequency that Rachel had hit moments before. Must be genetic. You can't do that. St. Augustine is my school. All my friends are there. You can't just. She turned to me, her eyes wild with panic and fury. You ruined my life. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This 14-year-old who'd spent the last 2 years treating me like I was furniture that occasionally spoke. Who'd made snide comments about my clothes, my car, my existence, who challenged me to hit her brother after he'd assaulted me. This girl who thought Wi-Fi speed was a measure of social class and that poor people were somehow less human. Sweetheart, I said, My voice gentle but firm. The way you talk to someone who's just realized they're not the main character they thought they were. I didn't ruin it. I just pressed reality mode. Consider this a software update. This isn't funny. She was full-on yelling now, tears streaming down her face, probably already mentally composing the sob story she'd post later about her evil stepfather. Do you know what this means? Do you have any idea what it's like to be kicked out of private school? I'll have to go to public school with normal people. The horror, I said dryly. Imagine having to attend school with 90% of the American population. How will you survive? Milo appeared then, sleepy and confused, his hair sticking up like he'd been electrocuted. He was dragging his blanket behind him like Lioness from Peanuts, his tablet tucked under his arm because, God forbid he go 30 seconds without it. He looked around at his mother's tear-streaked face, his sister's meltdown, and me standing there calmly drinking coffee like the house wasn't burning down around us. What's happening? He asked, his voice small and uncertain. For the first time since I'd known him, he actually looked like a kid instead of a tiny tyrant. Rachel tried to compose herself, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara in the process. Mo, baby, come here. She pulled him into a hug that he didn't seem to want, his arms pinned awkwardly at his sides. Your stepfather has made a very selfish decision that's going to affect your whole life. Milo looked at me over his mother's shoulder, his eyes confused, and for the first time actually scared. Did I do something bad? And there it was, the moment. The kid finally connecting dots that his brain hadn't been developed enough to connect before. The realization that maybe, just maybe, hitting people might have consequences, that maybe actions don't exist in a vacuum, that maybe the guy who'd been quietly funding his privileged life wasn't just an ATM with feelings that could be ignored. I set down my coffee, walked over to where he was standing, and knelt down, so we were eye level. Rachel tried to pull him away from me, but he stayed put, waiting for my answer. I looked at this kid, this entitled, spoiled, but ultimately just confused kid who'd been raised by a mother who thought confidence meant never having to say sorry. I smiled. Not a mean smile, not a vindictive one. Just soft, almost sad. No, kiddo, I said quietly. You didn't do something bad. You just showed me where the money shouldn't go. You showed me that paying for a fancy education doesn't mean anything if nobody's learning the most important lessons. What lessons? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Respect, gratitude, understanding that people aren't just walking wallets. I reached out and ruffled his hair gently. You'll learn those lessons now, though. Just maybe not in a building with marble floors and a Latin motto. Rachel yanked him away from me then, her face twisted with rage. Don't you dare act like you're teaching them anything. You're being petty. You're being cruel. This is about your ego, your pride, because you can't handle that my kids don't worship you. I stood up, brushed off my knees, and looked at my wife, this woman I'd married 2 years ago, thinking we'd build something together, only to discover I'd really just signed up to be a financial provider for a family that saw me as a resource, not a person. You're right about one thing, Rachel, I said, my voice steady and calm. This is about me. It's about me finally recognizing my worth. It's about me understanding that love shouldn't cost $56,000 a year. It's about me realizing that I've been enabling bad behavior by cushioning every consequence with my checkbook. You're impossible, she shouted, throwing the letter onto the counter where it landed next to the burning pancakes she'd completely forgotten about. Smoke was starting to rise from the pan, adding a literal smoky backdrop to this figurative dumpster fire. I walked over, turned off the stove, and moved the pan to a cool burner. Even in crisis, someone had to be the adult. Might as well be me. Actually, I said, turning back to face my family. This collection of people who'd shared my house but never really let me into their hearts. I'm finally possible. For the first time in this house, I'm actually possible. The real me. Not the doormat version. Not the ATM version. Not the guy who smiles while getting slapped and laughed at. Just me, the guy who's decided he's worth more than this. Harper had collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her phone like it could somehow save her from public school. Milo was clinging to Rachel, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Rachel was staring at me with something between hatred and disbelief, like I'd transformed into a stranger right in front of her eyes. Maybe I had. You'll regret this, Rachel said, her voice cold and hard now. You'll wake up tomorrow and realize what you've done and you'll try to fix it and it'll be too late. I picked up my briefcase. Yes, I still used a briefcase. Sue me and headed toward the door. I had work in an hour and surprisingly I was looking forward to it. The office drama would be a vacation compared to this. You're right, I said pausing at the doorway, looking back at the wreckage of our Thursday morning. I will wake up tomorrow and I'll realize exactly what I've done and I'll smile. I walked out, closing the door behind me on Rachel's protests, Harper's sobs, and Milo's confused questions. The morning air was crisp and cool. Birds were still chirping. The sun was still shining, and I felt lighter than I had in 2 years. The silent treatment began approximately 30 seconds after I left for work that Thursday morning. And let me tell you, it was glorious. I'm talking pure uninterrupted blessed silence. The kind of peace that monks spend decades meditating to achieve, and I got it for free just by canceling a tuition payment. If I'd known silence was this easy to obtain, I would have done it 2 years ago. Day 1 was the best. I came home from work around 6, my time, too. Maybe stopped at Target to browse the tools section for 20 minutes even though I didn't need tools, just to extend my freedom, and walked into a house that felt like a library after closing. Rachel was in the kitchen aggressively making a smoothie. And when I say aggressively, I mean she was throwing kale into the blender like it had personally offended her entire bloodline. Bananas were being peeled with the violence of someone defusing a bomb. The blender roared to life with a sound that suggested it was also angry and perhaps questioning its life choices. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my existence, just made her angry smoothie, which was probably some combination of spinach, protein powder, and pure rage. Poured it into one of her collection of motivational tumblers. This one said she believed she could, so she did, which felt ironic given the current situation, and stormed upstairs. Her footsteps were so heavy. I'm pretty sure our downstairs neighbors felt them. Except we didn't have downstairs neighbors because we lived in a single-family home. But if we did, they would have filed a noise complaint. Harper was camped out on the couch in full sulk mode, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito of teenage despair. Her hair was in a messy bun that actually was messy, not the Instagram kind, and she was scrolling through her phone with the enthusiasm of someone reading their own obituary. Every few minutes, she'd sigh dramatically, like Broadway-level dramatic. The kind of sigh that deserved its own sound effect and maybe a spotlight. I walked past her to grab a beer from the fridge. "Hey Harper, how was your day?" "Nothing." Not even an eye roll. Just pure concentrated ignore mode. She scrolled harder on her phone, if that was even possible. Her thumb was moving so fast I was worried she'd sprain it. Cool, I said to absolutely no one. My day was great. Thanks for asking. Had a really productive meeting about network security. Bob from accounting brought donuts. It was a whole thing. More silence. I popped open my beer and headed to my closet office or my dying plant, and I could contemplate our lives in peace. The plant was looking slightly better. Actually, I'd been watering it more consistently lately. Turns out when you're not emotionally exhausted from family drama, you have energy for things like basic plant care. Who knew? Day 2 followed the same pattern, except Rachel had upgraded from angry smoothies to angry meal prep. I came home to find her in the kitchen surrounded by about 47 Tupperware containers, violently chopping vegetables like they were photos of my face. The knife was hitting the cutting board with such force I was genuinely concerned for the structural integrity of our countertop. Milo was at the dining table, unusually quiet, doing homework, actual homework, without being asked, without complaining. Without making sound effects or throwing things or acting like sitting still was a form of torture. He was just sitting there writing things, looking almost studious. I stood in the doorway for a second, making sure I wasn't hallucinating. "Milo, you good, buddy?" He glanced up at me, something different in his eyes. Not quite fear, not quite respect, but definitely not the smug confidence he'd had before. More like uncertainty, like he was recalculating his entire understanding of how the world worked and coming up with numbers that didn't add up the way they used to. "Yeah," he said quietly, then went back to his homework. Rachel slammed a container shut so hard I thought the lid might achieve orbit. She grabbed her meal prep containers, all labeled with days of the week in her perfect handwriting, and started loading them into the fridge with the efficiency of someone who was channeling all their emotions into food organization. I grabbed some leftover pizza from the fridge, cold pizza, breakfast of champions, and divorced dads, which I wasn't yet, but could see on the horizon, and retreated back to my office. The silence followed me like a comfortable shadow. I hadn't seen this much peace since our honeymoon in Costa Rica. Back in those blissful 5 days before Rachel got food poisoning and blamed me for suggesting we try that beachside ceviche stand, turning our romantic getaway into what I could only describe as a hostage situation with better weather. Day 3 was when things started getting weird. Not bad weird, just different weird. Harper actually came out of her blanket cocoon and took a shower. Like a real shower, not the 30-second and rinse she usually did while scrolling through TikTok. Rachel stopped making angry smoothies and angry meal prep and just made regular smoothies, regular food. Still didn't talk to me, But her movements had less I'm imagining this is your face energy and more I'm tired and confused energy. Milo asked me to help him with his math homework. Let me repeat that because it's important. Milo asked me for help. I was in the living room pretending to watch TV, but actually just enjoying the quiet when he shuffled over with his textbook. And this look on his face like he was approaching a wild animal he wasn't sure was friendly. Can you? He started, then stopped, then started again. Can you help me with fractions? I looked at him. He looked at me. Rachel was watching from the kitchen, her smoothie frozen halfway to her mouth. Harper had her phone pointed in our direction, probably live streaming this unprecedented moment of a stepchild acknowledging my existence. Sure, I said, patting the couch next to me. Let's see what you're working on. He sat down, not right next to me, but closer than he'd ever voluntarily been, and opened his book. We worked through 3 problems together. He actually listened, actually asked questions, actually said, thank you. When we finished, Rachel's smoothie remained frozen in midair. That night, I heard her on the phone with her mother. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, okay? I was totally trying to eavesdrop. I was standing outside our bedroom door like a creep. But in my defense, I was a creep who just nuked his family's entire educational arrangement and wanted to know what the fallout assessment was looking like. I don't know, Mom, Rachel was saying, her voice tired and small in a way I hadn't heard in years. We enrolled them in Jefferson Public. It's not the same. Harper's devastated. Milo's confused. And she paused. I could picture her sitting on our bed, probably staring at her phone or her reflection or some combination of both. He won't even fight with me. He's just calm. And somehow that's worse. Brenda's response was muffled, but I caught the words divorce and lawyer and show him. I don't think that's Rachel started then trailed off. More silence. Then maybe I didn't realize what he was actually contributing. Maybe I thought it was just supposed to happen, like it was automatic progress. Small, glacial, possibly imaginary progress, but progress nonetheless. Day 4, Friday, the end of the most peaceful work week I'd had in 2 years. I came home to find Rachel sitting at the kitchen table alone. No smoothie, no phone, no meal prep, just sitting there looking deflated like someone had let all the air out of her influencer dreams and left her with just regular reality. We enrolled them in public school, she said without preamble, without looking at me. Her voice was flat, defeated. Jefferson Middle and Jefferson High. They start Monday. It's not the same. I set down my briefcase, loosened my tie, and pulled out a chair across from her. We sat in silence for a moment. The kitchen clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, all the normal sounds of a house that was trying to figure out if it was still a home. No, I agreed, keeping my voice gentle because even though I'd orchestrated this whole thing, I wasn't a monster. I was just a guy who'd reached his limit. No marble hallways, but maybe they'll learn something marble can't buy. She looked up at me then, her eyes red-rimmed, her face free of makeup for maybe the first time since I'd known her. Like what? Manners, I said simply. Respect. How to treat people who care about them. How to say thank you. How to exist in the world without expecting everything to be handed to them on a silver platter with a side of entitlement. She didn't reply, didn't argue, didn't defend her kids or attack me or launch into one of her speeches about how I didn't understand parenting. She just sighed, not dramatically like Harper, but deeply like someone who'd been holding their breath for 2 years and finally exhaled. I didn't realize, she said quietly. Realize what? The difference between luxury and love. We sat there in the kitchen as the sun set outside, the light fading through the windows, and for the first time since that slap heard around the living room. I thought maybe, just maybe, something royal might actually grow here. Weeks passed, not in that dramatic movie montage kind of way, but in the slow, uncomfortable way that actual change happens. With awkward dinners, forced conversations, and everyone slowly figuring out who they were without the safety net of private school prestige, Milo adjusted faster than anyone expected. Turns out when you strip away the entitled environment and stick a kid in a place where nobody cares that his stepdad used to pay premium tuition, he actually becomes decent. He started drawing, like really drawing, not just doodling on his iPad, but actual pencil on paper art. He'd bring home sketches of superheroes and dragons and sometimes just random kids from his class. His teacher called to say he'd been helping other students with math. The same kid who'd slapped me was now saying please and thank you without being prompted. Miracles do happen. Apparently, Harper got humbled by life in a way that was honestly more effective than any punishment I could have designed. Public school didn't care about her Instagram aesthetic or her influencer dreams. Nobody was impressed by her designer clothes. She came home after the first week looking shell-shocked like she discovered gravity was real. But slowly, painfully slowly, she started changing, made actual friends instead of followers, joined the art club, started saying good morning to me without her phone in her hand. One Saturday afternoon, Milo came up to me while I was reading on the porch. He was holding a piece of paper folded carefully, looking nervous in that way kids do when they're about to do something vulnerable. "I made you something," he said quietly, handing it over. I unfolded it. It was a drawing, him and me, sitting in a boat, fishing poles in hand. The sun was setting in the background, all oranges and purples that he'd colored carefully. Above it, in his wobbly handwriting, he'd written, "Me and Dad." Dad, not stepdad, just Dad. I didn't cry. Men don't cry. Our eyes just leak pride sometimes, and mine were definitely leaking as I pulled him into a hug. Rachel stood in the doorway watching us. She looked different now, softer, quieter, less concerned with how things looked and more concerned with how things felt. We've been talking more, actually talking, not just coordinating schedules. She'd apologized last week. A real apology, the kind that takes courage. "Thank you," she'd said, "for not giving up on us, for teaching them what I couldn't." Now I sit on this porch some mornings sipping coffee, watching the sunrise, and I smile. Because revenge doesn't always need fire and fury. Sometimes it just needs one canceled payment and a whole lot of patience. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones money can't buy. And sometimes, just sometimes, people actually learn them.
And that concludes this story. That was a pretty wild one if you ask me. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Now, let's get right into the next story. It's titled,
My little boy was found alone on the highway at 2 a.m. I never knew my wife would go this far. When police asked him what happened, his words broke me completely. The shop smelled of motor oil and old coffee, a scent Andrew Ward had grown to love over the years. At 2:07 a.m., he was finishing up the last of the day's paperwork. His calloused fingers smudged with grease as he tallied receipts under the flickering fluorescent light. The garage stood silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the corner and the occasional ping of cooling metal from the last car he'd worked on. His phone buzzed against the steel workbench. The vibration loud in the quiet. Andrew glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He considered ignoring it. Nothing good came from calls at this hour, but something made him answer. This Andrew Ward, a man's voice, official and tired. Speaking. This is Trooper Daniels with the Missouri State Highway Patrol. We've got a situation here on Route 17. Just past mile marker 43. Found a boy walking the shoulder. Says his name is Miles Ward. Says you're his father. Andrew's hand tightened around the phone. The words didn't make sense at first, like hearing a foreign language. Miles was 4 years old. Miles was supposed to be asleep in his bed at Tara's place, tucked under the dinosaur blanket Andrew had bought him last Christmas. That's Andrew's voice caught. He cleared his throat. That's my son. Where is he now? We've got him at the station. He's okay. Just cold and scared. How fast can you get here? 15 minutes. Ender didn't remember grabbing his keys or locking the shop. The October night, air hit his face like a slap as he ran to his truck, his breath forming clouds in the darkness. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. An accident. Tara hurt. The house on fire, but the trooper had said Miles was walking. Walking alone on a highway in the middle of the night. The engine roared to life and Andrew peeled out of the parking lot, his headlights cutting through the empty streets of Redwood Crossing. The small Missouri town looked different at this hour. Storefronts dark, traffic lights blinking yellow. Not another soul in sight. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The state police station sat on the edge of town. A squat brick building with harsh white lights illuminating the parking lot. Andrew killed the engine and was out of the truck before it fully stopped. His boots hitting the pavement at Iran. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner replaced the garage smells. A young officer at the desk looked up, started to speak, but Andrew was already scanning a room. Then he saw him. Miles sat on a wooden bench against the far wall, drowning in an adult-sized police jacket, his small legs dangling off the edge. His face was pale, strewn with dried tears, and there was a scrape on his left knee. Blood dried in a thin line down his shin. When he saw Andrew, his whole body seemed to collapse inward with relief. Daddy. The word was barely a whisper, but it tore through Andrew's chest. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of his son, pulling the small body into his arms. Miles clung to him, his little hands fisting in Andrew's work shirt, and Andrew could feel him shaking. I've got you, Andrew murmured into his son's hair. I've got you. You're safe now. Trooper Daniels appeared beside them, a thick man with gray at his temples and kind eyes that had seemed too much. He waited until Andrew looked up before speaking. Mr. Ward, we need to ask Miles a few questions. Just understand what happened tonight. Andrew nodded but didn't let go of his son. He shifted so Miles sat on his knee, still wrapped in a jacket, still pressed against his father's chest. Daniels crouched down to eye level, his voice gentle. Miles, buddy, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up on the road? Miles's fingers tightened on Andrew's shirt. His voice came out small and flat, like he was reciting something he'd been taught not to say. Mom said I had to leave because I cost too much. The words landed in the quiet station like stones dropping into still water. Andrew felt them settle in his chest, cold and heavy. His arms tightened around Miles instinctively, protectively, while his mind struggled to process what he just heard. Danielle's expression hardened. Your mom told you to leave the house. Miles nodded against Andrew's chest. Was anyone else there? Was she home? She went out with Ree. She said I was too loud and I make everything expensive and I had to go find Daddy. Andrew's jaw clenched so hard his teeth itched. He kept his breathing steady control because Miles needed him calm right now. But inside something fundamental had shifted, not broken. Breaking implied weakness, fragility. What happened inside Andrew Ward in that moment was different. It was a hardening, a crystallization of every frustration and fear he'd carried for 4 years since the divorce. Every missed phone call, every bruise he noticed on Miles's arms that Tara explained away. Every time she'd spend his child support on new clothes while Miles wore shoes 2 sizes too small. He would never forgive Tara Lundell. Not tonight. Not ever. But he wouldn't confront her with tears or anger or desperate pleas. He would destroy her with logic, with evidence, with the cold machinery of the law. He would dismantle her life piece by piece until there was nothing left but the truth everyone could see. Mr. Ward, Daniel stood, gesturing toward a small office. We need to talk. Andrew carried Miles with him, unwilling to let go. In the office, Daniels closed the door and leaned against the desk, his expression grim. We're going to need to file a report. Child abandonment, possibly endangerment. Where's the mother now? I don't know. Andrew's voice was steady, almost eerily calm. She has Miles Tuesday through Friday. I get him weekends and Mondays. She lives in the duplex on Carver Street. We'll send someone to check on her, make sure she's aware of the situation. Daniels pulled out a form. Did you have any indication she might do something like this? Andrew thought about the last 4 years. The pattern he'd been too hopeful to fully acknowledge. She's always treated him like a burden, Andrew said quietly. Miles had finally stopped shaking, his breathing evening out against Andrew's shoulder. Complained about the cost of everything. Dropped him with neighbors whenever she wanted to go out. I tried reporting concerns to child services once, but he paused, remembering she's good at performing. She cried, said she was overwhelmed and stressed. They bought it. This time there's no performance that'll explain a 4-year-old on a highway at 2 a.m. Daniel started writing. We'll need your contact information, and we'll be in touch about next steps. For tonight, take your boy home. He's been through enough. Andrew stood, adjusting Miles in his arms. The boy had fallen asleep, his small body finally relaxing. Andrew looked down at his son's face, the same nose as his own, the same stubborn chin, and felt that cold determination settle deeper. Thank you, Trooper. Mr. Ward. Daniels met his eyes. Document everything from here on out. Photos, times, conversations, everything. You're going to need it. Andrew nodded once and carried his son out into the night. The drive home was quiet. Miles slept curled in the passenger seat, still wrapped in the police jacket, his hand clutching Andrew's work shirt like a lifeline. Andrew drove slowly, carefully, his mind already moving through the steps ahead. The past 4 years played through his memory like a film he'd seen too many times. Meeting Tara when he was 28, fresh from technical school, working his first job at a mechanic shop in Jefferson City. She'd been beautiful, confident, from a wealthy suburb near Kansas City. She'd seemed so sure of everything, so polished compared to his grease-stained hands and small-town simplicity. The relationship moved fast, too fast, probably. Pregnant within 6 months, married 3 weeks later in a courthouse ceremony Tara complained about for months afterward. She'd wanted her family there, but they'd cut her off years before over something she never fully explained. Money, probably. It was always money with Tara's family. Miles was born on a rainy April morning, and for a few months, Andrew had believed they might make it work. But Tara had never wanted to be a mother. She wanted the idea of it, the attention, the sympathy, the validation, the reality of a crying infant. Sleepless nights, and stretched finances killed whatever affection she'd had for Andrew. The divorce came when Miles was 6 months old. Andrew didn't fight it. He just wanted his son safe and cared for. He agreed to shared custody, to child support payments that took half his paycheck to letting Tara choose her days. He thought if he was reasonable, if he cooperated, things would be okay. He'd been wrong. Over the following years, Andrew watched his son become an afterthought in Tarara's life. She fed Miles cheap food, ramen, frozen dinners, fast food, while posting pictures of expensive restaurant meals with friends. She left him with elderly neighbors for hours, sometimes overnight, without warning. She bought herself new phones, new clothes, while Miles wore hand-me-downs from a cousin Andrew didn't even know he had. Andrew tried to help. He bought clothes that Tara said disappeared or got ruined. He packed extra food in Miles's backpack. He documented strange bruises, behavioral changes, moments when Miles would flinch at sudden movements. He called child services once, his heart pounding, convinced he was doing the right thing. The social worker had been young, overwhelmed, skeptical. Tara had put on a perfect show, tears streaming, voice breaking as she talked about being a single mother, about doing her best, about the stress of raising a child alone. She'd even implied Andrew was harassing her, trying to get out of paying support. The social worker had given Andrew a look that said she'd seen this before, bitter fathers making false claims, and closed the case. Andrew had felt the door closing on his ability to protect his son. He'd learned to be more careful, more patient. He'd waited for Tara to make a mistake big enough that no one could explain it away. Tonight, she had. He pulled into the driveway of his small house. A rental, nothing fancy, but clean and warm and filled with Miles's toys. He carried his son inside, laying him gently on the couch while he turned on lights and adjusted the thermostat. Miles stirred but didn't wake. Andrew knelt beside the couch, looking at the scrape on Miles's knee. He retrieved the first aid kit from the bathroom and carefully cleaned the wound, applied antibiotic ointment, covered it with a bandage decorated with cartoon trucks. Miles whimpered in his sleep, but didn't wake. Then Andrew pulled out his phone and took photos. The scrape, the jacket that was far too large. Miles's face pale and exhausted even in sleep. He noted the time, the date, the circumstances, every detail. He sat in the armchair across from the couch as the night slowly gave way to dawn, watching his son sleep and planning his next move. He didn't feel angry. Anger was hot and immediate and uncontrolled. What he felt was cold, precise, patient. Tara had declared war the moment she sent their 4-year-old son onto a dark highway. She just didn't know it yet. Andrew waited until the sun rose, painting the living room in shades of gold and amber before making the first call. Marlon Vance answered on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep. "This better be important, Andrew." She left him on a highway. Silence, then Miles. State police found him walking Route 17 at 2 in the morning. She told him he cost too much and sent him out to find me. Andrew heard movement on the other end. Marlon getting out of bed, probably his footsteps creaking across old floorboards. Marlon had handled Andrew's divorce, had watched the custody arrangement form, had seen the frustration Andrew carried for years. He was in his 60s, a small-town lawyer with more integrity than ambition. The kind of man who took cases because they were right, not because they paid well. Is he okay? Physically, yes. Scrape on his knee, cold, terrified, but alive. And Tara, I don't know where she was. Miles said she went out with her boyfriend, left him alone, and told him to leave. Marlon exhaled slowly. Okay, listen to me. This is the break we've been waiting for, but we have to be smart. We can't let emotion drive this. I'm not emotional. Andrew's voice was flat, certain. I'm done playing nice, Marlon. I'm done trying to co-parent with someone who sees our son as a financial burden. I want full custody, no shared anything, no visitation without supervision. I want her out of his life in every way that matters. Another pause. Andrew, this won't be simple. She'll lie. She'll perform. You know she will. Then we make the truth louder than her lies. That's what I'm talking about. Andrew heard the faint sound of coffee being poured. We'll need documentation. Every interaction from now on, every bruise, every late pickup, every text message. Can you do that without tipping her off? Already started. Good. Marlon's voice shifted into planning mode. We'll file for emergency custody modification. The police report will be our foundation, but we need more. We need a pattern. Can you talk to neighbors? Anyone who might have seen her neglect? Yes. Do it quietly. We don't want her lawyering up before we're ready. And Andrew, Marlon's voice softened slightly. I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but you need to stay calm. Stay focused. The court will look at you, too. They want to see you're stable, rational, the better parent. Can you do that? Andrew looked at his son, still sleeping on the couch, one small hand curled under his cheek. "I can do whatever it takes." After hanging up, Andrew made breakfast quietly. Scrambled eggs, toast, juice. Miles woke around 8, blinking in a morning light, momentarily confused about where he was. Then he saw Andrew and relief flooded his small face. "Daddy." "Hey, buddy." Andrew sat on the edge of the couch. "How do you feel? Tired?" Miles's voice was. "Is Mom mad?" The question hit Andrew harder than he expected. Not is Mom okay or where's Mom, but is Mom mad? As if her anger was the natural consequence of Miles's existence. "Don't worry about Mom right now," Andrew said gently. "You're staying with me for a while. Okay, we're going to have breakfast, and then maybe we can watch some cartoons. How does that sound?" Miles nodded, his expression uncertain but willing. Andrew carried him to the kitchen, settled him in his chair, and watched him eat slowly, methodically, like he wasn't sure when the next meal might come. Andrew's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Trooper Daniels. Officers went to the Carver Street address. Mother wasn't home. Left a note for her to contact us. We'll keep you updated." So, Tara still wasn't home. Hours after sending her son onto a highway. She was still out. Probably with Reese called her, the new boyfriend Andrew had heard about but never met. Younger than Tara. No job that Andrew knew of. The kind of guy who smiled too much and meant none of it. Andrew saved the message, screenshotted it, backed it up to his cloud storage. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. The day passed quietly. Miles seemed content to stay close, watching television, playing with his trucks on the living room floor. Andrew worked from home when he could, doing paperwork, and ordering parts online. He kept Miles in his line of sight at all times, noting every small behavior. How Miles startled at loud noises. How he hoarded snacks in his pockets. How he asked permission before doing anything. These were the behaviors of a child who'd learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible. Around 3 in the afternoon, Andrew's phone rang. Tara. He let it go to voicemail, then listened as her voice, bright, casual, annoyed, filled his ear. "Hey, so the police left some weird note at my place. Something about Miles. Call me back. This better not be you causing drama again." Not a trace of worry, not a hint that she'd sent her son into the night and hadn't thought about him since. Andrew saved the voicemail. Then he called back, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the counter with the voice recorder app running. She answered immediately. "Finally. What's this about?" "Miles was found walking Route 17 at 2 this morning." "What? That's impossible. He was asleep. He was on a highway. Tara alone at 2 o'clock in the morning." "Well, I don't know how that happened. He must have snuck out. You know how he is. He told the state police you sent him out. Said you told him he cost too much." Silence. Andrew could practically hear her recalculating. "That's ridiculous. He's 4. You probably dreamed it. Kids make up stories. The police have a report. There's a record now. This is your fault." Her voice shifted, turning sharp. "You turn him against me. You make him say things. You've been trying to take him away since the divorce. I didn't put him on a highway. I didn't either. And if you try to use this against me, I swear to God, Andrew." He hung up. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. He had what he needed. Her immediate denial. Her attempt to blame Miles. Her threat. All recorded, all time-stamped, all saved. Miles appeared in the doorway, his dinosaur blanket trailing behind him. "Was that Mom?" "Yeah, buddy. Is she coming to get me?" The hope in his voice was small, uncertain, like he didn't quite believe it himself, but had to ask anyway. It broke Andrew's heart and hardened his resolve simultaneously. "Not tonight," Andrew said. "But you're safe here. You know that, right?" Miles nodded slowly, then quietly. "I like it better here." Andrew pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of kid shampoo and sleep, and made a silent promise. Miles would never have to beg for safety again. Never have to wonder if he was wanted. Never have to walk a dark highway alone. Whatever it took to make that true, Andrew would do it. Even if it meant destroying the woman who'd given Miles life, especially then. The next morning, Andrew drove Miles to preschool. The director, Mrs. Patterson, met them at the door with a concerned expression. The state police had called ahead. She explained quietly to let them know about the incident. She promised to keep Miles close to call if anything seemed off. Andrew watched his son disappear into the colorful classroom. Already moving toward the blocks with another little boy, and felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. He couldn't be with Miles every second. He had to trust others to help, to watch, to care. It went against every instinct he had right now. But he also had work to do. His first stop was the duplex on Carver Street. Tara's car wasn't there. He didn't knock. Instead, he walked the perimeter slowly, noting details. The garbage bins overflowing with takeout containers and wine bottles. The broken lock on the back gate. The window screen hanging loose on one side. The yard littered with cigarette, but Tara didn't smoke, which meant Reese did, which meant Reese spent significant time here. Andrew took photos of everything. His second stop was Darlene Fritz's house, 3 doors down from Tara's duplex. Darlene was in her 60s, a retired teacher with sharp eyes and a soft heart. She'd babysat Miles a few times when Tara needed emergency coverage, which usually meant Tara wanted to go out and hadn't bothered to plan ahead. Darlene answered the door wearing a cardigan and reading glasses, a mystery novel in one hand. Her expression shifted from pleasant to concerned when she saw Andrew. "Oh, honey, I heard what happened. Is Miles all right?" "He's okay." Physically, Andrew hesitated. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She stepped back, gesturing him inside. Her house smelled like cinnamon and old books. They sat in her living room surrounded by photos of grandchildren and shelves of well-worn paperbacks. "I need to ask you about Tara." Andrew began about how she treats Miles. Darlene's mouth tightened. "What do you want to know?" "The truth. Whatever you've seen." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers worrying the edge of her cardigan. Then she spoke, her voice sad but certain. "That boy cries for her every night. I can hear him through the walls. Our houses are close, you know. He calls for her and she never answers, or if she does, it's to yell at him to be quiet." Darlene looked down at her hands. "She brings him to me at all hours. Sometimes she says she'll be back in an hour and I don't see her for 8. Once she left him here overnight without warning. I woke up and he was still asleep on my couch." "How often does this happen?" 2, 3 times a week. More recently, since that boyfriend moved in, Andrew felt his jaw tighten. "Race, I don't know his name. Younger guy drives a red Mustang, smokes on the porch, loud music at all hours." She met Andrew's eyes. "I don't like the way he looks at Miles. Cold, you know, like the child's an inconvenience." "Have you ever seen him hurt Miles?" "Not physically, but I've heard him yelling, and I've seen Miles's face when he comes to my door. That boy is scared. Would you be willing to write this down?" In a statement, Darlene didn't hesitate. "If it helps keep that child safe, I'll write whatever you need." Andrew left 20 minutes later with a signed statement, dated and witnessed by Darlene's signature. His third piece of evidence. Over the next few days, Andrew moved quietly through Redwood Crossing, talking to anyone who might have seen something. The clerk at the grocery store remembered Tara leaving Miles in the car alone while she shopped. The child crying visible through the window. The manager at the gas station recalled Tara paying for cigarettes and lottery tickets while claiming she didn't have enough for milk. The elderly man who lived across from the duplex had seen Tara loading the car late at night multiple times, leaving Miles visible in the window alone. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle. Each statement was written, signed, saved. Marlon called midweek with an update. "I've filed for emergency custody modification. There'll be a hearing in 2 weeks. The judge is Catherine Brennan. She's fair but tough. She'll want to see clear evidence of danger to the child. I'm gathering it." "Good. I also found something interesting." Papers rustled in the background. Reese called her. Tara's boyfriend. "He's got a history." Andrew's grip tightened on his phone. "What kind of history?" 3 years ago, he was investigated for child endangerment. He was dating a woman with a 2-year-old. Left the kid alone in a motel room while he went gambling at a casino. Kid was found by housekeeping the next morning alone for 8 hours. The mother dropped the charges, but the report still exists. Something cold settled in Andrew's chest. Not surprise, confirmation. So, Tara's living with a man who has a documented history of abandoning children. It gets better or worse, depending on how you look at it. Reese has been unemployed for 6 months. No income, which means he's living off Tara, which means he's living off your child support payments. Andrew felt the pieces clicking into place. Tara's increased neglect, her sudden defensiveness about money, her irritation with Miles. She was supporting Ree, which meant less money for Miles, which meant Miles had become even more of a burden. "Can we use this in court?" "Absolutely. A documented history of child endangerment connected directly to the person Tara has chosen to have around your son combined with the highway incident. Andrew, this could win us full custody." "Could. Nothing's guaranteed, but we're building a hell of a case." After hanging up, Andrew sat in his truck outside Miles's preschool, watching parents arrive to pick up their children. Happy reunions, excited chatter, little hands reaching for bigger ones. This was what childhood should look like. Safe, expected, loved. He thought about Tara, about the woman he'd married and the woman she'd become. Had she always been this way? Had he been too naive to see it, or had something in her genuinely changed, twisted by resentment and unfulfilled expectations? It didn't matter. Whatever she'd been before, she was dangerous now. And Andrew would make sure everyone could see it. Miles came bounding out of the building, his backpack bouncing against his small shoulders, his face lighting up when he saw Andrew's truck. That smile, that pure, uncomplicated joy at seeing his father was everything Andrew needed to remember why he was doing this. "Daddy, I made a picture. Can't wait to see it, buddy." That night, as Andrew tucked Miles into bed, the bed that was becoming his permanent bed, though neither of them had said it aloud yet, Miles looked up at him with serious eyes. "Am I really too expensive?" The question hit Andrew like a physical blow. He sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "No, Miles. You're not expensive. You're priceless. That means you're worth more than any amount of money. Do you understand?" Miles nodded slowly, uncertain. "Your mom." Andrew paused, weighing truth against protection. "Your mom made a mistake. A big one. But that's not your fault. None of this is your fault. But she said, I know what she said. She was wrong." Miles was quiet for a moment. Then so softly, Andrew almost missed it. "I'm glad I'm here." Andrew pulled his son close, feeling the small body relax against him. "Me, too, buddy. Me, too." After Miles fell asleep, Andrew returned to the living room and pulled up the file Marlon had sent about Reese Calder. Police reports, court documents, witness statements from 3 years ago. The details were damning. A child left alone in a locked motel room, crying for hours, no food, no water, no care. The mother had defended Ree, said it was a misunderstanding, dropped the charges. But the investigating officer's notes painted a clear picture of a man who prioritized gambling over a child's safety. And Tara had brought this man into Miles's life. Andrew's phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Ward, this is Alicia Briner." Ree called his ex. "Can we talk?" Andrew stared at the message. How had she found his number? What did she want? He responded, "How did you get this number?" "Mutual friend, I heard what happened to your son. I think you should know some things about Ree. Call me tomorrow at noon." Andrew sent his number and sat back, his mind racing. Whatever Alicia Brenner had to say, it would be another piece of the puzzle, another weapon in the arsenal he was building. Tara had started this war the night she sent Miles onto a dark highway. Andrew was going to finish it. The days leading up to the phone call with Alicia Brenner felt strangely suspended, like the quiet before a storm. Andrew maintained his routine. Drop Miles at preschool, work at the shop, pick Miles up, dinner, bedtime stories. But underneath the normally, he was preparing for battle. At exactly noon the following day, Andrew's phone rang. He was in his office at the shop. The door closed, a notepad and pen ready on his desk. "This is Andrew. Mr. Ward, thank you for taking my call." The woman's voice was tired but determined, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "I'm Alicia Brenner. I was with Reese Calder for 2 years. We had a daughter together." Andrew's pen stilled. "Ah, she's safe. She lives with my parents now. Full custody. I got clean, got away from Ree. Got my life back, but it took almost losing everything. What do you need to tell me?" Alicia took a breath. "Ree is dangerous. Not in the obvious way. He's never hit anyone, never threatened anyone directly. But he's manipulative. He finds women who are vulnerable, who have something he wants. Money, a place to stay, respectability, and he bleeds them dry. Tara, when I heard about what happened to your son, I knew the pattern. Reese doesn't like kids. Sees them as competition for attention and resources. When I was with him, he'd leave our daughter alone for hours. Sometimes he'd lock her in her room so she wouldn't bother him. The incident 3 years ago, the casino, the motel, that wasn't a one-time mistake. That was who he is." Andrew was writing quickly, recording every word. "Why didn't the charges stick?" "Because I was stupid." Her voice cracked slightly. "I loved him. Or I thought I did. He convinced me it was all a misunderstanding. That the police were overreacting. That if I didn't defend him, they'd take our daughter away. So, I lied. I said it was my fault that I'd asked him to watch her and he'd made a mistake. I protected him and my daughter paid the price. What changed? He left me 6 months later for someone else. Someone with more money, a better situation. And I finally saw what I'd been protecting. A man who'd put my daughter in danger without a second thought. A man who'd manipulated me into covering for him." Andrew processed this information, connecting it to what he already knew. You said Tara's vulnerable. What makes you think that? I did some research, found her social media, mutual friends. She's estranged from her family. She's got a history of bad relationships. She's overwhelmed and probably resentful of being a single mother. That's Reese's type. He targets women like that. Women who will make excuses for him because they're desperate for help, for companionship, for someone to tell them they're doing okay. And my son's in the middle of that. Yes. Alicia's voice gentled. Mr. Ward, I should have spoken up 3 years ago. I should have told the truth about Ree then. I can't undo that. But I can tell you this. If you're going to court to protect your son, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything about Ree. His pattern, his manipulation, his history. Maybe it'll make a difference this time. Andrew felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly, but certainty. This was the missing piece. Not just the police report from 3 years ago, but a living witness willing to testify about Reese's pattern of behavior. I'll have my lawyer contact you. And Alicia. Andrew paused. Thank you for speaking up this time. After they hung up, Andrew called Marin immediately and relayed the conversation. Marlon whistled low and long. Andrew, this is it. This is the twist we needed. A pattern of behavior, a documented history, a witness willing to testify. Combined with everything else we have, we can make the case that Tara isn't just neglectful. She's actively choosing a dangerous partner over her child's safety. When's the hearing? Next Thursday, 10 days. Think you can keep it together until then? I'm fine, Marlon. I know you think you are, but Andrew, listen to me. You need to be more than fine in that courtroom. You need to be the picture of stability, calm, rational, the responsible parent. No matter what Tarara says, no matter how she spins things, you can't react emotionally. Can you do that? Andrew thought about the cold certainty he'd felt since that night at the police station. The way his anger had crystallized into something harder, sharper, more controlled. I can do that. Good. I'll prepare Alicia, get her statement, make sure she's ready to testify. You focus on documenting everything with Miles. Every meal, every bedtime, every moment of stability you're providing. That's your story in court. Not that Tara is a monster, but that you're the better choice, the safer choice. The next week passed in careful documentation. Andrew photographed every meal he made for Miles. Balanced, nutritious, varied. He noted, every night Miles slept through without nightmares. Every morning he woke up smiling. He recorded their conversations. The way Miles was slowly opening up, laughing more, playing with more confidence. He also installed cameras in his house. Small discreet ones in common areas. Not to spy, but to document. If Tara accused him of anything, he'd have proof of how he treated Miles, of how safe and stable this home was. 3 days before the hearing, Tara showed up at the shop. Andrew was under a car replacing brake pads when he heard the sharp click of shoes on concrete. He rolled out from under the vehicle and found Tara standing in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun. She looked different, thinner, harder, her makeup heavier than he remembered. She wore a coat that was too expensive for someone who claimed she couldn't afford to feed her son properly, and her nails were freshly manicured, painted a bright red. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Andrew stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. Call my lawyer. Don't be dramatic. This is about Miles. Everything is about Miles. That's the problem. You never understood that. Tara's expression tightened. You've turned him against me. You're poisoning his mind. I didn't put him on a highway at 2 a.m. She flinched. And for a moment, Andrew thought he saw something like guilt flash across her face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by defensive anger. That was a misunderstanding. He wandered out. I was asleep. You told the police on the phone that night that you let him go because he wanted to see me. Which version is true, Tara? She blinked, caught in the contradiction. I was confused. It was late. I didn't know what I was saying. Miles told the police you said he cost too much. That you sent him out to find me. He's 4. He doesn't understand. Then explain it to the judge next week. Tara's face drained of color. You're actually doing this. You're actually trying to take him away. I'm trying to keep him safe. There's a difference. I'm his mother. You're the woman who gave birth to him. Being a mother is more than biology. Something flickered in Tarara's eyes. Rage, maybe. Or fear. You think you're so perfect. You think this little life you've built makes you better than me. But you're just a mechanic, Andrew. You live in a rental. You work with your hands. I could give Miles more. You could give him nothing but pain and neglect. You already have. Tara stepped closer. her voice dropping to something venomous. "I will destroy you in court. I will tell them how you harass me, how you turn Miles against me, how you're unstable and controlling. I'll make them see what you really are." Andrew met her gaze steadily. "Go ahead and try." She stared at him for a long moment, searching for weakness, for fear. She found neither. Finally, she turned and walked out, her heels echoing against the concrete. Andrew waited until her car pulled away before returning to work. His hand steady on the wrench, his mind clear. Let her threaten. Let her plan. Let her believe she could win with lies and performance. He had the truth. And in 10 days, everyone would see it. That evening, Andrew sat with Miles on the couch reading a picture book about a dragon who learned to be brave. Miles leaned against him, warm and solid and safe. And Andrew felt that cold determination solidify even further. He would win this. Not because he was perfect, not because he had money or status or charm, but because he showed up, because he cared. Because when his son needed him, Andrew had been there. And Tara hadn't. That was the only story that mattered. The night before the hearing, Andrew barely slept. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario, every question Tarara's lawyer might ask, every lie she might tell. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, he gave up and went to check on Miles. His son was sprawled across his bed, covers kicked off, one arm flung above his head. Andrew gently covered him again, and Miles stirred, his eyes opening halfway. "Daddy, I'm here, buddy. Go back to sleep. Will Mom be there tomorrow?" Andrew hadn't told Miles about the hearing. Hadn't wanted to worry him, but kids sense things. Picked up on tension and unspoken concerns. "Yes, but it's just grown-ups talking. Nothing for you to worry about." Miles nodded sleepily. "Okay, love you, Daddy." "Love you, too, Miles." Andrew stood in the doorway after Miles fell back asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of his son's chest, and made a silent promise. Tomorrow he would be calm, strategic, unshakable. Tomorrow he would make sure Miles never had to worry about being sent away again. Tomorrow, Tara Lundell's comfortable lies would meet the uncomfortable truth. And Andrew Ward would make certain the truth won. Act in 2. The courthouse in Cedar Glen sat at the center of town, a structure of stone and aged wood that had witnessed decades of marriages, divorces, disputes, and resolutions. The building felt cold in the morning light, imposing in its authority, and Andrew felt the weight of it as he climbed the steps with Marlon at his side. "Remember," Marlon said quietly, his briefcase heavy in his hand, "stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't volunteer extra information. Let me handle the legal arguments." "I understand." "And Andrew," Marlon paused at the door. "Whatever she says in there, however she tries to spin this, don't react. Don't give her the satisfaction. Show the judge who you are by how you handle yourself." Andrew nodded. He dressed carefully that morning. Clean jeans, a button-down shirt, his best boots. Not pretending to be something he wasn't, but showing respect for the process. He wanted the judge to see a working man who cared about his son, not someone putting on an act. They entered the courtroom and Andrew's eyes immediately found Tara. She sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Vo, who had a reputation for aggressive defense strategies. Tara wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She dressed to look like a struggling mother, responsible and overwhelmed. Andrew noticed her hands shaking slightly as she clutched a tissue. Ree was nowhere to be seen, smart of her lawyer to keep him away. The bailiff called the room to order and Judge Catherine Brennan entered. She was in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every possible excuse and believed none of them until proven otherwise. Andrew felt a flicker of hope. This was a judge who would look at evidence, not performances. "We're here for the matter of Ward versus Lundell regarding custody modification." Judge Brennan began settling into her seat. "Mr. Vance, you filed the emergency motion. Present your case." Marlon stood buttoning his jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Andrew Ward, is seeking full custody of his son, Miles Ward, age 4, based on documented child endangerment by the respondent, Tara Lundell. On October 15th of this year, at approximately 2:07 a.m., Miles was found by Missouri State Highway Patrol walking alone on Route 17. He was cold, frightened, and injured. When asked how he came to be on the highway, Miles stated that his mother told him he cost too much and that he needed to leave to find his father. Tarara's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, if I may, the child is 4 years old. He's not a reliable narrator. Ms. Lundell has stated that her son wandered out while she was asleep. This was a terrible accident, but not intentional endangerment." Judge Brennan held up a hand. "You'll have your turn, Ms. Voss." Continue, Mr. Vance. Marlon nodded. We have the police report from Trooper Daniels, who was first on scene. We have photographs of Miles's condition that night. We have documented statements from neighbors who have witnessed a pattern of neglect over the past 2 years. And we have testimony from an expert witness regarding Miss Lundell's current boyfriend and his documented history of child endangerment. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. A boyfriend with a criminal history. Not criminal, Your Honor, but documented by Child Protective Services. Ree Calder was investigated 3 years ago for leaving a 2-year-old child alone in a motel room for 8 hours while he gambled at a casino. The charges were dropped when the mother declined to press them, but the investigation report still exists. Miss Lundell has been living with Mr. Calder for approximately 3 months. We have testimony from his exordiner that his behavior toward children is consistent and dangerous. Tara leaned toward her lawyer, whispering urgently. Patricia Vaux's expression tightened. Your Honor, Vaux said, standing again. Miss Lundell's relationship with Mr. Calder is irrelevant to this case. She is the mother. She is primary custody. One incident of a child found alone on a highway at 2 a.m. is hardly minor. Ms. Voss. Judge Brennan interrupted. I'll hear the evidence. Mr. Vance, call your first witness. The petitioner calls Trooper Robert Daniels. The state trooper entered through the side door, still in uniform, his expression professional but sympathetic. He was sworn in and took the stand. Marlon approached. Trooper Daniels, can you describe the events of October 15th? Yes, sir. At approximately 1:55 a.m., I was on patrol along Route 17, when I spotted what appeared to be a small child walking along the shoulder. I pulled over and found Miles Ward, age 4, wearing pajamas and no shoes. The temperature was approximately 48 degrees. The child was cold, frightened, and had a minor injury to his knee. What did Miles tell you when you asked how he came to be there? He said his mother told him he had to leave because he cost too much. He said she told him to go find his daddy. Was the child certain about this? Did he seem confused or unreliable? No, sir. He was clear and consistent. He repeated the same story multiple times in the same words. In my experience, that's often an indicator of truth. Children who are making things up tend to change details. What was the child's emotional state? Traumatized, shaking, crying, difficult to console. That level of distress in a child that young. It stays with you. Marlon nodded. Thank you, Trooper. No further questions. Patricia Vaux stood for cross-examination, her expression sharp. Trooper Daniels, you said Miles claimed his mother told him to leave, but you didn't witness this conversation, correct? No, ma'am. And you're not a child psychologist qualified to determine whether a 4-year-old is a reliable witness. I'm a father of 3, and I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know when a child is telling the truth, but you can't know that for certain, can you? I know the child was on a highway in the middle of the night. However he got there, someone failed him. Judge Brennan intervened. Miss Voss, do you have questions about Trooper Daniels' observations, or are you just arguing? No further questions, Your Honor. Marlon called his next witness, Darlene Fritz. The elderly woman entered nervously, her hands clutching her purse, but her voice was steady when she took the oath. Marlon guided her through her testimony carefully. Miss Fritz, how often do you see Miles Ward? 2-3 times a week usually. His mother brings him to me when she needs a sitter. How often does Miss Lundell request your help? Lately, very often, sometimes with only a few minutes' notice. Sometimes she says she'll be back in an hour and doesn't return until the next day. Has Miss Lundell ever left Miles with you overnight without warning? Yes, twice that I can remember. I woke up and he was still on my couch. Miss Fritz, you live 3 doors down from Miss Lundell. Have you observed how she treats Miles when she's home? Darlene's expression saddened. I can hear them through the walls. Our houses are close. That boy cries for her at night. Every night, and she doesn't answer or she yells at him to be quiet. Objection. Patricia Vaux called. Hearsay, Your Honor. This is an observation from a neighbor regarding a pattern of neglect. Marlon countered. I'll allow it. Judge Brennan said, continue, Miss Fritz. In your observation, is Miles's mother attentive to his needs? No. Darlene's voice was firm. I don't think she wants to be a mother. I think she sees that child as a burden. Objection. Sustained. Miss Fritz, please stick to what you've observed, not your interpretations. Yes, Your Honor. I've observed her leaving him alone, yelling at him, ignoring him when he cries. Is that better? Andrew saw Tara's face flush red, her hands clenching in her lap. Patricia Voss whispered to her urgently, probably telling her not to react. After Darlene came the grocery store clerk, then the gas station manager, then the elderly neighbor across the street. Each testimony added another layer to the picture. A mother who prioritized herself over her child, who saw Miles as an inconvenience, who left him alone and uncared for. Then Marlon called Alicia Briner. She entered the courtroom looking nervous but determined, her eyes briefly meeting Tara's before looking away. When she was sworn in, Marlon asked her to identify herself. "I'm Alicia Briner. I was in a relationship with Reese Calder for 2 years. We have a daughter together, Ms. Brenner. Can you describe Mr. Calder's behavior toward children? He doesn't like them. Sees them as competition for attention and money. When we were together, he'd leave our daughter alone for hours. Once he locked her in a room so she wouldn't bother him while he played video games. Are you aware of the incident 3 years ago involving Mr. Calder and her daughter?" "Yes. He left her alone in a motel room while he went gambling. She was 2 years old. She was found by housekeeping the next morning alone for 8 hours. Why were charges dropped?" Alicia's voice dropped. "Because I lied. He convinced me to say it was a misunderstanding, that I'd asked him to watch her and he'd made a mistake. I protected him and I've regretted it every day since." "Why are you testifying today?" "Because I fail my daughter. Then I won't fail another child now. If Miles is living with Ree, he's in danger. Ree doesn't change. He manipulates vulnerable women and he sees their children as obstacles." Patricia Vaux's cross-examination was brutal but ineffective. She tried to paint Alicia as a bitter ex with an axe to grind, but Alicia remained calm and consistent. "Ms. Briner, isn't it true you're still angry at Mr. Calder for leaving you?" "I'm grateful he left. It gave me a chance to get my daughter to safety." "You're testifying against him out of spite." "I'm testifying because I know what he is and I know what happens to children around him." After Alicia stepped down, Marlon turned to Andrew. The petitioner calls Andrew Ward. Andrew stood, his legs steady, his mind clear. He'd been preparing for this moment all week. He took the stand, was sworn in, and faced Marlon. "Mr. Ward, describe your relationship with your son." "I love him. He's the most important thing in my life." "Describe a typical day when Miles is with you." "I wake him up gently. We have breakfast together, something nutritious, balanced. I ask him about his dreams. We talk about what he wants to do that day. I take him to preschool, pick him up, help with whatever homework or activities he has. We make dinner together. He helps me set the table. We read before bed. He chooses the books." "How does Miles behave when he's with you?" "He's happy, relaxed. He laughs more, plays more confidently. He sleeps through the night. He doesn't flinch at sudden movements." "Does he flinch when he's been with his mother?" "Yes. And he hoards food, hides snacks in his pockets like he's afraid there won't be more." "Have you documented Miles's condition when he returns from his mother's care?" "Yes, I have photographs of bruises, of clothes that are too small, of times when he's been returned hungry and unwashed." Marlon submitted the evidence, folders full of photographs dated and annotated. Judge Brennan looked through them, her expression growing grimmer with each page. Patricia Vaux's cross-examination tried to paint Andrew as controlling, as someone who resented paying child support, as a father who manipulated his son. "Mr. Ward, isn't it true you tried to take custody before?" "I've expressed concerns about my son's safety." "Yes. Concerns that child services didn't find credible." "Tara is very good at lying." Objection sustained. "Mr. Ward, answer the question that was asked. Child services close a case. That doesn't mean there wasn't a problem. It means Tara convinced them there wasn't. You're bitter about your divorce." "I'm grateful for my divorce. It gave me clarity about who Tara really is." "You hate Ms. Lundell." "I don't hate her. I pity her. She's a woman who had a child she didn't want and can't love, and now she's destroying him piece by piece." Objection. Withdrawn. Patricia Vaux snapped. No further questions. Andrew returned to his seat. Marlon squeezed his shoulder briefly. "Well done." Then it was Tara's turn. She took the stand, looking appropriately emotional. Eyes red, tissue in hand, posture humble. Patricia Vaux guided her through a carefully crafted narrative. "Ms. Lundell, describe what happened the night of October 15th. "I was exhausted. I've been working all day and Miles had been difficult, not listening, throwing tantrums. I put him to bed and fell asleep myself. The next thing I knew, the police were calling saying they'd found him. I was horrified." "You didn't tell him to leave?" "Of course not. I love my son. I would never send him out into the night." "Why do you think Miles said you did?" "He's 4. He doesn't always understand what's real and what he's imagined." "And Andrew," she glanced at Andrew, her expression wounded. "Andrew has been turning him against me since the divorce, telling him I don't care, that I don't want him." Objection, Marlon said wearily. There's no evidence Mr. Ward has done any such thing. Your Honor, Ms. Lundell is explaining her son's state of mind. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Miss Voss. The testimony continued. Tara painted herself as an overwhelmed single mother doing her best, a victim of circumstance and Andrew's manipulation. She cried at appropriate moments. She spoke about how much she loved Miles, how hard she tried. When Marlon stood for cross-examination, his expression was neutral, but his questions were surgical. Miss Lundell, you testified that you were asleep when Miles left the house. Where was Reese called her? Tara hesitated. I don't know. He wasn't there that night. Are you certain? Because we have a witness who saw his car in your driveway until approximately 1:30 a.m. He might have stopped by earlier, but he was gone by the time I went to sleep. So, you're not certain where Mr. Calder was that night? No. M. Lundell. Were you aware of Mr. Calder's history with Child Protective Services? No. We don't talk about his past relationships. Even though he's living in your home with your son, he doesn't live with me. He stays over sometimes. How often? I don't know, a few nights a week. So, a man with a documented history of child endangerment stays in your home multiple nights per week around your 4-year-old son, and you didn't think to ask about his past. Tara's composure was cracking. He's good to Miles. He helps out, does he? We have testimony from neighbors that they've heard him yelling at Miles, that they've seen him ignore the child for hours. That's not people are exaggerating. Ms. Lundell, the night Miles was found on the highway. Where were you? I told you I was asleep. Your phone records show you made calls at midnight, 1 a.m., and 1:30 a.m. you were awake. Tara's face drained of color. I was calling so you weren't asleep. You lied to this court. I was confused about the timeline where you were awake when you sent your son out into the night. I didn't send him out. Then explain how a 4-year-old boy in pajamas ended up walking a highway at 2 o'clock in the morning. Ms. Lundell. Because the alternative is that you were so neglectful, so inattentive that your child could disappear from your home and you didn't notice. Which story makes you look better? Tara burst into tears. Real ones this time, not performed. I was trying to help him. He wanted to see his father. He was crying and I was tired and I thought if he walked to the corner he'd realize it was too far and come back. I thought he'd come back. The courtroom went silent. Patricia Vaux's face was ashen. Marlon remained still, letting the words hang in the air. Judge Brennan leaned forward. Ms. Lundell, are you telling this court that you intentionally sent your 4-year-old son out of your home at night to teach him a lesson? Tara was sobbing now, her careful facade completely shattered. I didn't mean I thought he was so difficult and I was so tired. Your Honor, Patricia Voss interrupted desperately. My client is clearly overwhelmed. Your client just admitted to child endangerment. Judge Brennan said coldly. Sit down, Miss Voss. The judge shuffled through papers, her expression severe. And she looked up, her gaze moving between Tara and Andrew. I've seen a lot of custody cases. I've heard a lot of excuses, but I have never, she paused, her voice hardening. Never heard a mother admit to sending her child out into the night as punishment. Miss Lundell, you endangered your child's life. You lied to police. You lied to this court. You have demonstrated a pattern of neglect that puts your son at risk. Your Honor, please. I'm not finished. The judge's voice was steel. Custody of Miles Ward is awarded fully and permanently to Andrew Ward. Ms. Lundell, you are granted supervised visitation only 1 hour per week supervised by court-appointed guardian. You will undergo evaluation by Child Protective Services. You will complete parenting classes. And if you violate any of these conditions, you will lose visitation entirely. Do you understand? Tara's sobs were her only answer. Do you understand, Miss Lundell? Yes, she choked out. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound like finality itself. Andrew sat still, letting the moment settle. He'd won. Miles was his safe, protected, away from Tara's neglect and Reese's influence. He'd won. Tara was still crying at her table. Patricia Voss speaking to her in low, urgent tones. Andrew watched without emotion. He'd warned himself never to forgive her, and he felt no temptation to soften now. This was justice. Clean, clear, undeniable. Marlon packed up his briefcase. Let's get out of here. They left through the side door, avoiding the main hallway where Tara would eventually emerge. Outside, the autumn sun was bright, the air crisp and clean. Andrew, Marlon said quietly, you did good in there. Stayed calm, told the truth. Let the evidence speak. That's why we won. No, Andrew said. We won because Tara couldn't stop being who she is, even when it mattered most. That, too. They shook hands and Andrew walked to his truck. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, hands on the wheel, letting the reality settle. Miles was safe. Tara had no power over him anymore. The nightmare that started on a dark highway had ended in a courtroom with justice served. Andrew started the engine and drove toward Miles's preschool to pick up his son permanently now, and tell him he was home for good. In the weeks that followed the custody hearing, the full weight of Tara's collapse became visible. Andrew hadn't asked for it, hadn't orchestrated it beyond winning custody, but he watched it unfold with the same cold detachment he'd cultivated since that night at the police station. 2 weeks after the hearing, Andrew received a call from Trooper Daniels. "Mr. Ward, thought you should know. We conducted a follow-up investigation at Ms. Lundell's residence. Found evidence of continued neglect. The state of the apartment. Evidence Mr. Calder was living there despite her testimony. Child Protective Services has opened a full investigation. Will this affect her visitation? Possibly. Depends what else they find. But between you and me, she's lucky she's not facing criminal charges. Judges don't forget parents who admit to endangering their kids." Andrew thanked him and hung up. He felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just acknowledgement that the system was working as it should. 3 weeks after the hearing, Darlene Fritz called with an update. "Andrew, honey, I thought you should know. Tara lost her job. She missed too many shifts dealing with investigations and court dates. And she paused. Police came around asking questions about him. He left, moved out overnight from what I could see. Did he leave Tara or did she kick him out? Don't know. But she's alone now. Her car is there, but I haven't seen her in days. I've heard crying through the walls, though. All hours." Andrew thanked her and hung up. He imagined Tara in that duplex alone. Her support system gone, her job gone, her child gone. He felt no pity. She'd built this prison herself, brick by brick, with every choice she'd made. A month after the hearing, on a cold November evening, Andrew was making dinner with Miles when he heard a car door slam in his driveway. He glanced out the window and saw Tara's car, dented and dirty, parked at an angle. Then Tara herself appeared, walking toward the house. She looked wrecked. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup smeared, her clothes wrinkled. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and hollow. She looked like a woman who'd lost everything and didn't know how to begin rebuilding. "Miles, buddy, go play in your room for a few minutes." "Okay. Is that Mom?" Andrew saw the uncertainty in his son's face. Not excitement, not longing, just caution. Miles had asked about Tara a few times in the past month, but never with any urgency. "You seemed content here, settled, happier every day." "Yeah, I'll go talk to her. You stay inside." Miles nodded and disappeared down the hall. Andrew stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Tara stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Andrew, please." Her voice was raw, desperate. This wasn't a performance. This was genuine desperation from a woman who'd hit bottom and found it harder than she'd expected. "Please, what? Don't take him from me. I know I made mistakes. I know I was wrong, but he's my son. I can be better. I swear I can be better." Andrew looked at her and saw not the woman he'd married, but the woman she'd become through her own choices. Every decision that prioritized herself over Miles. Every moment she treated their son as a burden rather than a gift. Every lie she'd told to cover her negligence. "Miles isn't a paycheck, Tara. He's not a burden. He's a child who deserved better than what you gave him." She climbed 2 steps, reaching toward him. I know that now, but I can change. Give me a chance. I gave you 4 years of chances. You used every one of them to hurt him a little more. Andrew, I'm begging you. You never gave him what he needed. Not once. Not when he cried for you at night. Not when he was hungry. Not when he needed to feel safe. You gave him nothing." Tears streamed down her face, her mascara making dark tracks on her cheeks. "I love him." "No, you don't. You love the idea of him. You love the control, the attention, the sympathy people give single mothers. But Miles himself, you never love him enough to put him first." She sobbed, her body shaking. "Please, Andrew, don't do this. Don't take away my only chance. This isn't me taking anything. This is you losing what you threw away." She reached for him again and he stepped back, his hand on the door handle. "This is the last time we speak outside of court. You have supervised visitation starting next week. 1 hour once a week with a monitor present. If you miss a session, you lose the next one. If you cause problems, you lose them all. Those are the terms. Andrew, that's the deal. Tara, take it or walk away. But you don't get to come here and beg for mercy. You never showed our son. She stared at him, her face crumpling. You've destroyed my life. No, I protected my son. You destroyed your own life. Those are very different things. You stepped back inside and closed the door. Not a slam. That would have been emotional, reactive, just a quiet, firm closing. The final punctuation on a conversation that was over. Through the window, he watched Tarara stand on the steps for a long moment, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Then she turned and stumbled back to her car. The engine started, coughed, started again. She drove away, the tail lights disappearing into the November darkness. Andrew felt nothing. Not victory, not relief, not guilt, just the clean certainty that he'd done what needed to be done. Miles appeared in the hallway, his dinosaur blanket trailing behind him. Is Mom gone? Yeah, buddy. She's gone. Is she coming back? Eventually, you'll see her sometimes with someone there to make sure everything's okay. But you live here now. This is home. Miles nodded, processing this. Then quietly, I'm glad. Andrew pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of kid shampoo and safety, and felt something shift inside him. Not the cold hardness that had sustained him through the battle, but something warmer. Not forgiveness for Tarara, never that, but peace with the outcome. He'd fought for his son. He'd won. Miles was safe. That was all that mattered. The weeks turned into months. Winter settled over Redwood Crossing, bringing snow and cold and the quiet rhythm of a new life. Andrew established routines with Miles. Breakfast together, school drop-offs, pickups, homework at the kitchen table, dinner, bedtime stories. The cameras he'd installed for documentation became less necessary as Miles's behavior improved. The hoarding stopped, the flinching stopped, the nightmares stopped. Miles laughed more, played more confidently, made friends at preschool, drew pictures that showed happy families, houses with windows full of light, sons with big smiles. Tara attended her supervised visitations sporadically at first, missing 2 out of the first 4. The court monitor reported that when she did come, she spent most of the hour crying and asking Miles if he missed her. Miles's responses were polite, but distant. He'd answer her questions, accept her hugs, but showed no real attachment. The monitor noted in her reports that the child seemed more relieved when visitation ended than sad. After 3 months, Tara stopped showing up entirely. Her rights weren't terminated. She still had the theoretical ability to see Miles once a week, but she simply stopped trying. Andrew received a letter from her lawyer stating that Ms. Lundell was working on herself and would resume visitation when she was in a better place. Andrew filed the letter with all the other documentation and said nothing. If Tara wanted to fade from Miles's life entirely, that was her choice. He wouldn't prevent her from having a relationship with her son if she genuinely changed. But he also wouldn't pretend to miss her presence. Miles asked about his mother less and less frequently as winter progressed. Is Mom okay? Became, does Mom know it's my birthday? Became silence. Not hostile silence, not painful silence, just the quiet acceptance of a child who'd found stability and wasn't interested in disrupting it. On a bright January afternoon, 4 months after the custody hearing, Andrew took Miles to the lake behind their house. The water was partially frozen, the surrounding trees bare, but beautiful against the pale sky. They sat on the small dock, their legs dangling over the edge, bundled in winter coats and sharing a thermos of hot chocolate. Daddy, Miles said, watching his breath form clouds in the cold air. Are we safe now? The question hit Andrew unexpectedly, not because he didn't know the answer, but because it revealed how much fear Miles had been carrying. How long he'd felt unsafe, uncertain, unable to trust the world around him. Andrew wrapped an arm around his son, pulling him close. Yeah, buddy. We're safe. You're home, and I'll always protect you. I promise. Miles leaned against him, small and solid and trusting. Good. I like it when things are safe. Me, too. They sat in silence for a while, watching the frozen lake shimmer in the winter sun. Andrew thought about the night this all began. The phone call at 2 a.m., the terror of seeing his son wrapped in a police jacket, the cold determination that had settled in his chest. He'd promised himself he would never forgive Tara. That promise held true. What she'd done, sending a 4-year-old into the night as punishment, prioritizing her own convenience over her child's safety, was unforgivable. He felt no obligation to soften that judgment, no pressure to move on or let go. Some things shouldn't be forgiven. Some people don't deserve second chances. Not because they can't change, but because the harm they caused was too fundamental, too deliberate. But more important than his refusal to forgive, was his commitment to moving forward. He'd won the battle not through anger or revenge, but through patience, documentation, and letting the truth speak for itself. He'd stayed calm when Tara had tried to provoke him. He'd gathered evidence when emotion would have been easier. He'd played the long game and he'd won. And now, sitting beside his son on a frozen lake, Andrew felt something he hadn't expected. Not triumph, but contentment. The cold, hard determination that had driven him through the custody battle was thawing, being replaced by something warmer and more sustainable. The simple satisfaction of being exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. "Can we make hot chocolate again tomorrow?" Miles asked, interrupting his thoughts. "Sure, buddy. Every day if you want." Miles smiled, his cheeks pink from the cold. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you, too, Miles." As the sun began to set over Redwood Crossing, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Andrew felt the weight of the past months finally lifting. Tara had tried to break their son's future, but she'd only succeeded in destroying her own. She had chosen neglect over care, convenience over responsibility, selfishness over love, and she'd paid the price for those choices. Andrew didn't celebrate her downfall. He didn't gloat or feel vindicated. He simply acknowledged it as the natural consequence of her actions, the inevitable result of treating a child as a burden rather than a gift. He would never regret fighting for Miles. He would never regret the long nights of documentation, the careful gathering of evidence, the patient construction of a case that couldn't be denied. He would never regret staying calm when Tara tried to provoke him or remaining focused when emotion would have been easier. And he would never regret letting Tara fall. She'd built her own destruction choice by choice, lie by lie. Andrew had simply held up a mirror so everyone could see the truth. That wasn't cruelty. That was justice. "Daddy." Miles tugged on his sleeve. "I'm cold. Can we go inside?" "Yeah, buddy. Let's go home." They walked back to the house together. Miles's small hand in Andrew's larger one, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Inside, warmth waited. Lights in every window. Dinner cooking on the stove. A life built on stability and care and love. This was victory. Not the dramatic, explosive kind for movies, but the quiet, sustainable kind that mattered. The kind where a child felt safe enough to laugh, secure enough to sleep through the night. Loved enough to trust that tomorrow would be okay. Tara had cost them years of that peace, but she couldn't take the future that belonged to Andrew and Miles. Now, built on a foundation she could never touch. As Andrew helped Miles out of his coat and turned on the lights in the kitchen, he thought about the man he'd become through this ordeal. Harder, yes, less willing to trust, less inclined to give second chances, but also more certain of what mattered, more committed to protecting what he loved, more willing to fight battles that needed fighting. He didn't regret any of it. And as Miles settled at the kitchen table with crayons and paper, humming to himself while he drew another picture of their house, Andrew knew he'd made the right choices. Every single one. Tara Lundell had walked out of their lives as completely as she'd sent Miles out into the night. The difference was that Miles had found his way home. Tara was still lost. And Andrew Ward, standing in his kitchen watching his son draw pictures of sunshine and smiling faces, felt absolutely no obligation to help her find her way back. Some people deserve to stay lost. That was simply the truth. In truth, Andrew had learned was the most powerful weapon of all.
That brings this story to an end, and that one was definitely a wild ride. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, let's move into the next story, titled,
"I overheard my cheating wife mocking me to her coworkers. I can dump him anytime. He's useless to me. I just walked outside." One quiet phone call later, her boss stormed into the party, grabbed her arm, and screamed, "What did you do? My name is Marcus Hale, and let me tell you something right off the bat. I've never been the type of guy who gets off on corporate small talk and watered-down cocktails served by college kids in booties. But there I was, standing in some overpriced hotel ballroom because my wife Claire had pulled out every guilt trip in the book to drag me to her company's annual team-building shindig. You know the drill. Mandatory fun with a capital F, where everyone pretends they actually give a damn about quarterly reports and workplace synergy while secretly plotting their escape routes to the nearest bar. The whole scene was exactly what I'd expected. A perfectly choreographed nightmare of middle management trying way too hard to look important. The music was loud enough to make your ears bleed, but not quite loud enough to drown out the sound of people laughing at jokes that weren't funny. And don't even get me started on the champagne. I'm pretty sure they bought it in bulk from some discount warehouse. The kind of bubbly that tastes like carbonated regret with a hint of "why did I agree to this?" I'd planted myself strategically near the coat rack in the back corner of the room, which gave me the perfect vantage point to watch the circus unfold while staying close enough to my exit strategy. Call it survival instinct, call it social anxiety, call it whatever you want. I knew I'd need a quick getaway before someone cornered me to discuss their kids' soccer tournament or their thoughts on the latest company restructuring. These events had a way of sucking the life out of me faster than a vampire with a caffeine addiction. Claire, on the other hand, was in her absolute element. She'd been working this room like a politician running for office, floating from group to group in that glittery dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her laugh, God, that laugh, had been echoing across the ballroom all night, getting sharper and more grating with each glass of cheap champagne she knocked back. I'd been married to the woman for 8 years, so I knew the signs. When Claire got drunk at work functions, she turned into this weird hybrid of motivational speaker and reality TV villain. All confidence and cutting remarks disguised as humor. I was checking my watch for probably the 15th time in 10 minutes, calculating exactly how much longer I had to endure this social torture before I could reasonably claim exhaustion and head home. When I heard it, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a knife through butter, crystal clear despite the distance between us. Honestly, I can dump him anytime I want, she was saying, and I felt my blood turn to ice water in my veins. He's completely useless to me at this point. Time seemed to slow down to a crawl as those words hit me like a freight train carrying a cargo load of betrayal. I turned slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of her through the crowd. And there she was, head tilted back in that way she did when she thought she was being particularly clever. Her dress catching the light from the cheap chandeliers overhead. She was surrounded by her usual work crew, the same people who'd been kissing her ass all evening, and they were all nodding along like she'd just delivered some profound wisdom instead of casually destroying her marriage with a few careless sentences. But here's the kicker, and this is the part that really made my stomach drop. Her boss, Mr. Peterson, was standing right there next to her. Not just standing, mind you, but close enough that his hand kept brushing against her arm in a way that looked way too familiar, way too practiced, like they'd done this dance before, like this was just another Tuesday for them. The rational part of my brain wanted to march over there and demand an explanation. The emotional part wanted to grab the nearest champagne bottle and make a scene that would end up on YouTube by morning. But instead, I just stood there like an idiot, watching my wife of 8 years casually announce to her coworkers that I was disposable while her married boss played grab like he was auditioning for a harassment lawsuit. You know what's funny about moments like these? Everyone talks about the dramatic confrontation, the big blow-up, the screaming match that clears the air. But sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is absolutely nothing at all. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon in your arsenal. So I didn't yell. I didn't storm over there and cause a scene. I didn't even let my face show what I was feeling, which was roughly equivalent to being hit by a bus driven by my own stupidity. Instead, I simply turned around, grabbed my coat from the rack, and walked out of that hotel ballroom like I was just stepping out for some fresh air. The night air hit me like a slap across the face. Cold enough to make my eyes water, but somehow not cold enough to numb the burning sensation in my chest. I pulled my coat tight around me and started walking. My dress shoes clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like the countdown to my marriage's execution. I must have walked 3 blocks before I stopped, standing under a street light like some kind of noir movie cliché, pulling out my phone with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in probably 2 years, maybe longer. Adrian Knox, my old law school buddy, who'd somehow ended up working in compliance at Claire's company. Funny how life works out sometimes. The phone rang twice before he picked up, sounding slightly confused, but not entirely surprised to hear from me. Marcus, dude, it's been forever. What's up? My voice came out calmer than I expected, steady and controlled, like I was ordering coffee instead of potentially nuking my entire life. Adrian, you still tight with the executive team over there? Yeah, why? You sound weird, man. Good, I said, watching my breath form little clouds in the cold air. You're going to want to check on something right now tonight before morning comes and everything gets complicated. I told him just enough to get the wheels turning. Gave him just the right breadcrumbs to follow the trail I wanted him to find. Because here's the thing about guys like Adrian. They're natural-born investigators. And once you point them in the right direction, they can't help but dig deeper. Within minutes of hanging up, I knew the first domino had started to wobble. By the time I slipped into my car, engine purring to life in the quiet night, I had a pretty good feeling that Claire's evening wasn't going to end the way she'd planned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dish served cold. Sometimes it's a phone call made at exactly the right moment to exactly the right person. And as I drove away from that hotel, leaving behind the sound of fake laughter and corporate, I couldn't help but smile. After all, she'd call me useless. Time to prove her wrong. So there I was, standing on the curb like some kind of wounded animal licking his wounds. Except instead of bleeding, I was just really really pissed off and trying to figure out how to channel that rage into something productive. The street light above me was flickering like it was having its own existential crisis, which seemed pretty fitting given the circumstances. My phone felt heavier than it should have in my hands as I scrolled through my contacts, looking for a name I hadn't thought about in way too long. Adrian Knox, the guy who used to sit behind me in constitutional law, always cracking jokes about how our professor looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. We'd been tight back in law school, study partners, drinking buddies, the kind of friends who could finish each other's legal briefs after too many beers and too little sleep. But you know how it goes with old college friends. Life happens. Careers take off in different directions. And before you know it, Christmas cards turn into Facebook likes, which turn into absolutely nothing at all. Last I'd heard, Adrian had landed himself a cushy job in corporate compliance somewhere, which at the time had seemed like the most boring possible career path for a guy who used to debate constitutional amendments until 3 o'clock in the morning just for fun. But standing there in the cold, watching my marriage implode in real time, I was starting to think that maybe boring corporate jobs had their advantages. Especially when those boring corporate jobs happen to be at your cheating wife's company. See, the thing about having a photographic memory. And yeah, I'm one of those annoying people who actually remembers every damn detail of every conversation I've ever had, is that you tend to file away random pieces of information that seemed completely useless at the time. Like the fact that Claire had mentioned maybe 6 months ago during some mindless dinner conversation that the new compliance guy seemed really smart and actually kind of funny for a lawyer. She'd even mentioned his name, Adrian something, Knox, maybe. At the time, I'd filed it away under work gossip I don't care about and promptly forgotten about it. But now, standing in the cold with my wife's betrayal still ringing in my ears, that random piece of information suddenly seemed like the most important thing in the world. Because if Adrian Knox was the same Adrian Knox I used to know, and what were the odds of there being two Adrian Knoxes in corporate compliance in the same city, then I had just stumbled onto the kind of inside connection that could turn this whole situation from a personal disaster into something much more interesting. I hit the call button before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang once, twice, and for a second I thought maybe he wouldn't pick up. After all, who the hell calls their old law school buddy at? I checked my watch. 10:30 on a Friday night, but then I heard that familiar voice, slightly confused, but unmistakably Adrian Marcus. Holy dude. Is that really you? Hey man, I said, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart was beating like I just run a marathon. Yeah, it's me. I know it's been forever. Forever is right. What's it been, like 2 years? 3. Jesus, man. How are you? What's going on? This was the tricky part. I needed to give him enough information to get him interested, but not so much that he'd think I was having some kind of mental breakdown. Because let's be honest, calling your old college buddy in the middle of the night to potentially sabotage your wife's career probably qualified as at least a minor mental breakdown by most people's standards. I'm good, man. Listen, I know this is random, but I've got a question for you. You still working in compliance, right? At that big firm downtown? Yeah. Why? You sound weird. Like really weird. I took a deep breath and decided to go for it. You still close with the executive team over there? Like close enough that if something sketchy was going down, you'd know about it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in Adrian's head. He'd always been sharp as hell, the kind of guy who could spot a legal loophole from 3 miles away. If anyone could read between the lines of what I was asking, it would be him. Marcus, what the hell is going on? You're starting to freak me out a little bit. Look, I can't get into all the details right now, but I need you to trust me on this one. Remember how we used to talk about how the worst kind of corruption wasn't the obvious stuff, the embezzlement and the fraud, but the subtle stuff, the personal relationships that blur professional lines? Yeah, I remember. You wrote a whole paper on it senior year, right? Well, what if I told you that might be happening right under your nose tonight at whatever company event you guys are having? Another pause, longer this time. When Adrian spoke again, his voice had shifted into what I remembered as his professional mode. All business, no the quarterly celebration thing. That's tonight. How do you know about that? Because my wife works there and she dragged me to that party about an hour ago. And let me tell you, what I saw and heard tonight would make your compliance department very, very interested. Your wife? Wait, what's her name? Claire Hale. She's in the marketing department. Oh, Marcus. Man, you know her. I know of her. She's been on our radar for a few months now. Nothing concrete, just patterns, expense reports that don't quite add up. Travel schedules that seem a little too convenient, but we haven't been able to put together anything solid. Bingo. This was exactly what I'd been hoping for. Adrian wasn't just some random compliance drone. He was already suspicious of Claire's activities. All I had to do was point him in the right direction and let his natural investigative instincts take over. "Well, tonight might be your lucky night," I said. "Because what I witnessed about 20 minutes ago would probably qualify as the smoking gun you've been looking for. Question is, how quickly can you get back to that hotel? I can be there in 15 minutes. But Marcus, if this is some kind of marital revenge thing, it's not revenge, Adrian. It's justice. There's a difference. Okay. Hey, I'll bite. What exactly did you see?" I told him everything. The conversation I'd overheard, the way Peterson had been touching her, the casual way she dismissed our marriage like it was some kind of business transaction. She could terminate at will. I kept my voice level and professional, sticking to the facts and avoiding the emotional stuff. But I could hear Adrian's breathing getting heavier as I talked. "Jesus Christ," he said when I finished. "If even half of that is true, it's all true. Every word. I'm already in my car. This instant." And just like that, the second domino started to fall. You know what they say about karma. It's with perfect timing and an absolute flair for the dramatic. While I was sitting in my car 3 blocks away, sipping lukewarm coffee from a gas station cup that tasted like liquid disappointment. The real show was just getting started back at that overpriced hotel ballroom. And thanks to the magic of modern technology and a few well-placed text updates from Adrian, I had a front row seat to watch my wife's carefully constructed world come crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. According to Adrian's play-by-play, which he was sending me in real time like some kind of corporate warfare correspondent, Claire was still holding court in the center of the room when everything went sideways. She'd apparently moved on from trash-talking her useless husband to regaling her audience with some story about how she'd completely revolutionized the marketing department's approach to client relations. You know, because nothing says professional accomplishment like taking credit for other people's work while your boss plays grab-ass with you in front of half the company. The music was still thumping away. Some generic top 40 garbage that probably cost the company more in licensing fees than they paid their interns in a year. The lighting was still that awful combination of disco ball sparkles and fluorescent hotel ambience that made everyone look like they were recovering from a mild case of food poisoning. And Claire was still the star of her own little show, champagne glass raised high, surrounded by her usual crowd of workplace syphons who laughed at her jokes because they were too scared of corporate politics to do anything else. But then something shifted. Adrienne described it like watching a nature documentary where the gazelles suddenly sensed the lions closing in. There was this subtle change in the atmosphere, a collective holding of breath that swept through the room like an invisible wave. Conversations started trailing off mid-sentence. People began glancing toward the entrance with expressions that ranged from curious to downright terrified. Even the bartender seemed to sense that something was about to go very, very wrong. That's when Mr. Harrington made his entrance. Now, I'd never actually met the guy, but Claire had described him enough times for me to paint a pretty clear picture. Regional director, late 50s, the kind of executive who'd clawed his way up the corporate ladder by stepping on enough faces to build a staircase. He was apparently the type of boss who could make grown adults wet themselves just by clearing his throat in a meeting. Claire had always talked about him with this mixture of fear and reverence, like he was some kind of corporate deity who could make or break careers with a casual comment. But the man who stormed into that ballroom wasn't the composed, intimidating executive Claire had always described. According to Adrian, this guy looked like he was about 30 seconds away from having a complete meltdown. His face was red enough to stop traffic. His tie was crooked and he was moving through the crowd with the kind of focused rage that made people scramble to get out of his way like he was carrying the plague. The music didn't stop immediately. Some poor DJ was probably too confused to figure out what was happening, but the conversation sure as hell did. Adrienne said you could literally watch the silence spread across the room like ripples on a pond, starting from wherever Harrington was and expanding outward until the only sound was the bass line from some mindless dance track that nobody was dancing to anymore. Claire, bless her heart, was apparently so caught up in her own performance that she didn't notice the change in atmosphere until it was way too late. She was mid-sentence in some story about client satisfaction rates when Harrington's voice cut through the music like a chainsaw through butter. Claire Hale Adrienne said the woman actually jumped, like literally jumped and spun around with an expression that went from confident to terrified in about half a second. Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent ballroom like a gunshot. The golden liquid splashed across her glittery dress and the shoes of the people standing nearest to her, but nobody moved to clean it up. They were all too busy staring at what was about to unfold. Harrington marched straight through the crowd, which parted for him like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. When he reached Claire, he didn't hesitate, didn't pause for dramatic effect, Didn't give her a chance to explain or apologize or do any of the things people usually try to do when they're caught red-handed. He just reached out, grabbed her by the arm hard enough to make her wooz and roared at the top of his lungs. "What the hell did you do?" The entire room went dead silent. Adrienne said, "You could have heard a pin drop. Except pins don't usually drop in hotel ballrooms during company parties. So really, you could have heard someone's nervous breathing from across the room, which according to him, you actually could because that's exactly how quiet it got." Claire's face went through about 17 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, fear, anger, desperation, and finally this awful kind of dawning realization that whatever was happening, it was bad. Really, really bad. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to form words, but nothing came out except this pathetic little squeaking sound. Peterson, her boss, her apparent partner in workplace inappropriate behavior, tried to step in at that point. Adrienne said the guy actually put his hand on Harrington's shoulder and started to say something about taking this somewhere more private, but Harrington wasn't having any of it. He turned around and shoved Peterson back so hard that the man stumbled into a cocktail table, sending glasses flying and creating even more chaos. "You think I wouldn't find out?" Harrington screamed, his voice carrying across the ballroom like he had his own personal sound system. "You think this company is your personal playground? You think I'm some kind of idiot who wouldn't notice when my employees are playing house on company time and company money?" That's when the phones came out, because of course they did. In today's world, nothing says career-ending scandal like having your professional meltdown go viral before you've even finished having it. Adrienne said people were pulling out their cell phones like they were at a concert, except instead of recording their favorite song, they were documenting the complete destruction of a woman's career in high-definition video. Claire looked around the room with the desperate expression of someone who just realized that all her bridges weren't just burned, they'd been nuked from orbit. Her co-workers, the same people who'd been laughing at her jokes and kissing her ass all evening, were now staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Some of them were backing away, literally putting distance between themselves and the radioactive fallout of whatever Claire had done. And in less than 2 minutes, Adrienne texted me. Her entire empire of workplace charm had crumbled into dust. "Let me tell you something about watching your life implode from a safe distance. It's oddly therapeutic, like popping bubble wrap or watching those satisfying videos where people organize messy closets. I didn't stick around to witness Claire's public execution firsthand because honestly, I'm not that much of a sadist. Plus, there's something to be said for maintaining plausible deniability when your spouse's career is getting nuked in real time. But, thanks to Adrienne's detailed play-by-play and the magic of modern communication, I had a better view of the carnage than if I'd been standing right there with a front row seat and a bucket of popcorn. The immediate aftermath, according to my newfound corporate spy, was everything you'd expect from a workplace scandal that had just gone nuclear in front of half the company's management team. Harrington had dragged Claire into one of those generic hotel conference rooms. You know, the type beige walls and fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look like they're dying of consumption. While the party guests stood around looking like they just witnessed a car accident and weren't sure whether to help or start taking pictures for their insurance claims. Adrienne had managed to position himself close enough to the action to catch most of what went down, which was impressive considering he was supposed to be there in a professional capacity and not as my personal intelligence operative. But then again, compliance officers are basically corporate detectives, so maybe lurking around scandal scenes was just part of his job description. The evidence, it turned out, was even more damning than I'd hoped. Screenshots of Claire's internal messages where she'd been talking about various company policies and referring to expense account regulations as suggestions for the weak-minded. Receipts from company F-Foon business trips that seemed to coincide suspiciously with Peterson's travel schedule, including a particularly expensive weekend in Miami that was supposedly for a client conference that, surprise, surprise, nobody else from the company had attended. But here's the kicker, and this is the part that made me actually laugh out loud while sitting in my car. They had recordings, actual audio recordings of Claire and Peterson discussing how to manipulate project timelines to create more opportunities for collaborative work sessions in various hotel rooms across the tri-state area. Apparently, someone in HR had been building a case for months, just waiting for the right moment to drop the hammer. The whispers had started before Harrington even finished reading Claire the riot act. Adrienne said it was like watching gossip spread through a high school cafeteria, except instead of teenagers talking about who was dating whom, it was middle-aged professionals speculating about severance packages and legal liability. People were already pulling out their phones, not just to record the drama, but to start covering their own asses because nothing says professional self-preservation like immediately distancing yourself from a sinking ship that's also on fire. Legal had apparently been notified before Harrington even showed up at the party, which meant that while Claire was busy getting hammered and talking about her useless husband, some lawyer was probably already drafting termination paperwork and calculating how much the company's insurance was going to have to pay out to make this whole mess disappear quietly. By midnight, Adrian texted me. Claire's phone was buzzing nonstop with calls. She wasn't answering. Probably her work friends trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Or maybe Peterson trying to coordinate their stories before the lawyers got involved. Either way, she wasn't picking up, which was probably the smartest thing she'd done all evening. By 2 o'clock in the morning, she'd been escorted out of the hotel by security. Not arrested. Apparently, corporate malfeasance doesn't usually involve handcuffs unless there's actual embezzlement involved, but definitely given the old "don't let the door hit you on the ass on your way out" treatment. Adrienne said she looked like she'd been hit by a truck. All that earlier confidence replaced by the kind of shell-shocked expression you see on people who've just realized their entire reality has shifted fundamentally and permanently. Her work access had been locked by morning. Email, company credit cards, building key card, probably even her parking spot. All gone faster than you can say corporate investigation. It's amazing how quickly a company can erase someone's existence when they put their minds to it. One day you're an integral part of the team, the next day it's like you never existed except for a few awkward conversations around the water cooler and maybe a footnote in someone's compliance report. And me? Well, I spent the night sitting in my car in various parking lots around town, sipping coffee that got progressively worse as the hours wore on, feeling strangely calm about the whole thing. You'd think watching your marriage explode would be more traumatic, but honestly, it felt more like finally getting confirmation of something you'd suspected for a long time. Like when you keep hearing weird noises in your car engine and then the mechanic tells you the transmission is shot. Disappointing, sure, but not exactly shocking. I drove around aimlessly for a while, not ready to go home and face whatever conversation was waiting for me there, but not really having anywhere else to go either. It's funny how you can live in a city for years and still feel completely lost when your normal routine gets blown to hell. Every street corner looked familiar but somehow different. Like I was seeing everything through new eyes that had just learned a very unpleasant truth about the world. The strangest part was how normal everything else seemed. Traffic lights still changed from red to green. Late night diners still serve coffee to insomniacs and shift workers. The world kept spinning even though my personal universe had just imploded. There's something both comforting and deeply unsettling about that kind of cosmic indifference. By the time the sun started coming up, painting the sky in those pale pink and orange shades that make everything look like a postcard, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to be the guy who crawled back home with his tail between his legs, ready to forgive and forget and pretend like nothing had happened. I wasn't going to be the understanding husband who accepted Claire's inevitable apologies and promises to do better. No, I was going to be something much more dangerous than that. I was going to be the guy who'd been planning his next move while she was busy destroying her life. And if there's one thing I'd learned from 8 years of marriage to a woman who thought she was smarter than everyone else in the room, it's that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. Because while Claire had been busy burning bridges, I'd been building a whole new road. There's nothing quite like the sound of your soon-to-be ex-wife stumbling through the front door at 8 in the morning. Makeup smeared across her face like a Jackson Pollock painting made of mascara and regret. I was sitting at our kitchen table. Well, technically my kitchen table now, but we'll get to that little detail in a minute with my laptop open and a cup of coffee that actually tasted decent for once. Funny how everything tastes better when you're not choking down the bitter flavor of a dying marriage along with your morning caffeine. Claire looked like she'd been put through a blender set to life-destroying scandal and then reassembled by someone who'd never seen a human being before. Her hair was doing this weird thing where half of it was still trying to maintain the elegant updo she'd started the evening with, while the other half had apparently given up and was hanging in defeated strands around her face. That glittery dress that had cost more than most people's monthly rent was now wrinkled and stained with what I could only assume was a combination of champagne, tears, and the crushing weight of professional humiliation. But it was her eyes that really told the story. Gone was that confident sparkle she'd had when she was holding court at the party, replaced by something that looked like a deer in headlights. If the deer had just realized the headlights belonged to an 18-wheeler carrying a full load of career-ending consequences, she looked around our living room like she was seeing it for the first time, which in a way I guess she was. After all, it's amazing how different your home looks when you suddenly realize you might not be living there much longer. "What did you do?" She hissed at me and I had to give her credit for going straight to the accusation without bothering with any of that pesky good morning no pretense, no attempt to play innocent, just straight to the part where somehow this was all my fault. Because of course it was. In Claire's world, bad things only happened to her when other people made them happen. Personal responsibility was apparently a foreign concept, like metric measurements or admitting when you're wrong. I didn't look up from my laptop immediately. Call it petty, but But after 8 years of marriage to a woman who thought dramatic timing was a substitute for actual communication skills, I'd learned a thing or two about power dynamics. Let her stand there for a minute, I figured. Let her really absorb the situation she'd created for herself before I bothered to acknowledge her existence. When I finally did look up, I kept my expression neutral. Not smug, not angry, just empty, like I was looking at a stranger who'd wandered into my house by mistake. Good morning to you, too, sweetheart. Rough night. That's when she really lost it. Started going off about betrayal, about how her career was on the line, about how I'd sabotaged everything she'd worked for. The whole performance was actually pretty impressive in its complete lack of self-awareness. Here was a woman who'd been caught red-handed conducting an affair with her married boss on company time and company money. And somehow she'd managed to convince herself that I was the villain in this story. She paced around the living room like a caged animal, gesturing wildly with her hands and leaving little droplets of whatever she'd been drinking on our hardwood floors. The floors I'd spent 3 weekends refinishing last spring while she was off on one of her business trips that I now realized probably hadn't involved much actual business. You have no idea what you've done, she kept saying, like I was some kind of innocent bystander who'd accidentally triggered a nuclear weapon instead of a husband who'd finally gotten tired of being called useless by his cheating wife. My reputation, my career, everything I've built, everything you've built. I interrupted. Finally closing my laptop and giving her my full attention. You mean the career you built by screwing your boss and stealing credit for other people's work? That career, the look she gave me could have melted steel. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth. Point out that you've been lying to me for months. Or are you mad because I finally stopped being the quiet, useless husband you could push around whenever you felt like it? That's when I decided it was time for the big reveal. I'd been planning this moment for hours. Ever since I gotten home and started making calls to lawyers and accountants and various other professionals who specialize in untangling the messes that cheating spouses leave behind, it's amazing what you can accomplish in a few hours when you're motivated by righteous anger and armed with detailed financial records. You know what, Claire? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am going to destroy everything you've built. But not because I'm vindictive or cruel. Because you said I was useless and I wanted to prove you wrong. I opened my laptop again and turned the screen toward her. See this? Divorce papers already filed. And this bank statement's showing how I've transferred our joint savings into accounts with only my name on them. And this one's my personal favorite. Property deed transfers. Removing your name from the house title, the car titles, and pretty much everything else we own together. Watching the color drain from Claire's face was like watching a time-lapse video of someone realizing their entire life had just been repossessed. She grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter for support, her knuckles going white as she processed what I was telling her. You can't do that, she whispered. But we both knew she was wrong. I absolutely could do that, and I had done it all perfectly legally and with the help of some very expensive lawyers who specialized in making sure that cheating spouses got exactly what they deserved. Actually, I can. Turns out that when you've been married to someone for 8 years and you've been paying attention to things like joint accounts and property ownership and prenuptial agreements. Oh, wait. We don't have a prenup because you said they were unromantic. You learn a lot about how to protect yourself when your spouse decides to flush your marriage down the toilet. I stood up from the table and walked over to where she was standing close enough that she could see I wasn't bluffing, wasn't exaggerating, wasn't playing some kind of elaborate prank. You said I was useless to you, that you could dump me anytime you wanted. Well, congratulations, Claire. You just got your wish. Except instead of you dumping me, I'm dumping you. And unlike your approach, I'm doing it legally, thoroughly, and with documentation. The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful. For once, in our entire relationship, Claire had nothing to say. You know what's beautiful about a well-executed plan? It's not the big dramatic moments that everyone remembers. It's the small, quiet details that hit you like a punch to the gut when you least expect them. By evening, Claire had apparently processed enough of her morning shock to move from denial into what I can only describe as frantic damage control mode. She'd spent most of the day on her phone, probably calling every lawyer in the phone book and getting the same answer from all of them. Ma'am, if he filed the paperwork correctly, and you signed the prenup, there's not much we can do. I'd made myself scarce for most of the afternoon. Partly to give her space to fully absorb the magnitude of her situation and partly because I had some loose ends to tie up. Amazing how much paperwork is involved in dismantling a life you've spent 8 years building, banks to visit, accounts to close, forwarding addresses to set up. It's like moving house, except instead of packing boxes, you're packing up someone's entire existence and shipping it to a destination they didn't choose. When I got back around 6:30, the house was eerily quiet. No sound of Claire stomping around and slamming doors. No phone conversations where she alternated between sobbing and screaming. Just silence, which in my experience is usually a sign that someone is either plotting revenge or having a complete mental breakdown. Sometimes both. I found her in the living room sitting on our couch. Well, my couch now technically staring at her laptop screen with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for people trying to defuse bombs or figure out IKEA assembly instructions. She didn't look up when I walked in. Didn't acknowledge my presence at all. Just kept typing and clicking with the desperate energy of someone who believes that if they just work hard enough, they can somehow undo the laws of physics and make the last 24 hours disappear. Any luck with the lawyers? I asked, keeping my voice conversational, like I was asking about her day at the office instead of her attempts to legally challenge the systematic destruction of our marriage. She didn't answer, which was probably for the best. I wasn't really expecting her to engage in polite conversation anyway. Instead, I headed upstairs to finish the last few details of my exit strategy, leaving her to whatever digital Hail Mary she was attempting downstairs. That's when the real fun started. I was in the bathroom packing up my toiletries, electric toothbrush, that fancy face wash Claire had bought me for Christmas that I'd never used, the prescription glasses I only wore when my contacts were bothering me. When I heard the bedroom door slam open with enough force to rattle the picture frames on the wall. Marcus, Claire's voice carried all the way down the hall, high-pitched and desperate in a way that suggested she'd just discovered something that had shifted her understanding of reality in a very unpleasant direction. I took my time finishing up in the bathroom, carefully wrapping my toothbrush in a travel case, and making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. No point in rushing to witness someone's mental breakdown. They'll still be having it when you get there. When I finally strolled into the bedroom, Claire was standing in front of our walk-in closet, my former walk-in closet, with her mouth hanging open like she'd just witnessed a magic trick that had gone horribly wrong. She was staring at the empty space where my clothes used to hang, her head turning slowly from left to right, like she was watching a tennis match played by invisible players. My side of the closet was completely bare. No suits, no casual shirts, no jeans, no ties, not even the ratty old bathrobe I'd had since college that she'd been trying to throw away for years. Just empty hangers swaying slightly in the air conditioning breeze and the faint outline on the carpet where my shoe rack used to sit. Where? She started, then stopped, then started again. Where are all your clothes? I leaned against the doorframe, enjoying the view of someone discovering that their reality had shifted while they weren't paying attention. Move them, I said simply. Seemed like the right thing to do considering. She spun around to face me, and I could see her brain trying to process this new information on top of everything else that had happened. It was like watching someone try to solve a jigsaw puzzle while riding a roller coaster. Lots of frantic activity, not much actual progress. Move them, where does it matter? That's when she noticed the manila folder sitting on the dresser where my cologne bottles used to be. It was identical to the one I'd given her that morning, except this one had her name written across the front in my careful handwriting. She approached it like it might explode if she breathed on it wrong, which wasn't entirely unreasonable given how the last manila folder had worked out for her. What's this one? She asked, though her voice suggested she already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. Open it and see. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the folder and flipped it open. I watched her face change as she read through the contents. Bank statements showing account closures, property transfer documents, insurance policy modifications. Every piece of paper was another nail in the coffin of the life she'd thought she was living. But it was the USB drive that really got her attention. It was sitting at the bottom of the folder like a tiny black snake labeled in my neat handwriting. Play me. She looked from the drive to me and back to the drive, clearly trying to figure out whether she really wanted to know what was on it, but curiosity or maybe just masochistic completeness won out over self-preservation. She grabbed her laptop from the bed and plugged in the drive. The audio started playing immediately, her own voice, clear as a bell despite the background noise of the party. Honestly, I can dump him anytime I want. He's completely useless to me at this point. Then her laugh, that sharp, dismissive sound that had been echoing in my head for the past 24 hours. The recording played for about 30 seconds, just long enough to capture the full context of her casual cruelty before cutting off abruptly. The bedroom fell silent except for the sound of Claire's increasingly ragged breathing and the distant hum of the central air conditioning cycling on. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the laptop screen like it might suddenly sprout legs and run away, taking all her problems with it. When she finally looked up at me, her face had gone through so many emotional transformations that she looked like a completely different person from the confident woman who'd walked into that party the night before. You recorded me, she said. And it wasn't really a question. I didn't have to, I replied. You recorded yourself. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to capture it. The truth was I'd started recording on my phone the moment I heard her voice cutting through the party noise. Call it instinct, call it paranoia, call it whatever you want, but something had told me I was going to want evidence of whatever came next. How long? She whispered. How long? What? How long have you been planning this? I smiled at her then. The same calm smile I'd been wearing all day. Since the moment you decided I was useless, Claire. I just didn't know it yet. There's something absolutely poetic about watching someone's support system crumble in real time. Especially when that someone has spent the better part of a decade treating you like you're lucky to breathe the same air as them. Claire was still standing in our bedroom. Scratch that. My bedroom staring at that USB drive like it was a live grenade with the pin pulled when her phone started ringing. The ringtone was some generic pop song that probably cost her $5 to download, but it might as well have been a funeral dirge based on the way her face went white when she saw the caller ID. Mom, she whispered, like saying the name out loud might somehow make the call disappear. But the phone kept ringing because phones are relentless like that. And eventually, she had no choice but to answer or let it go to voicemail. And knowing Claire's relationship with her mother, letting it go to voicemail would probably just result in 17 more calls and a surprise visit within the hour. Marianne Sean, Claire had kept her maiden name for professional reasons, which now seemed hilariously ironic, was the kind of mother-in-law who made other mothers-in-law look like soft-spoken librarians. The woman had opinions about everything from Claire's career choices to the way we arranged our living room furniture. And she wasn't shy about sharing those opinions at volumes that could probably be heard from space. She'd never particularly liked me, but she'd tolerated me with the kind of resigned acceptance usually reserved for chronic illness or tax audits. But here's the thing about Marianne that Claire had apparently forgotten in all her scheming and planning. The woman was sharp as a tack when it came to money and legal matters. She'd built her own real estate empire from nothing back in the 80s when being an Asian woman in business meant fighting twice as hard for half the respect. She could smell financial trouble from 3 counties away, and she had zero patience for people who made stupid decisions with their money. Claire answered the phone on the 5th ring, her voice artificially bright in that way people use when they're trying to pretend everything is fine, while their world burns down around them. Hi, Mom. What's up? But Marianne wasn't in the mood for pleasantries, apparently. Even from across the room, I could hear her voice coming through the phone speaker. Sharp and cold as winter in Alaska. Why did I just get a notice that your name has been removed from the condo title? And there it was, the moment when Claire realized that her little domestic drama had just gone nuclear. Because see, what Claire had conveniently forgotten to mention during all our years of marriage was that her mother had co-signed on a bunch of our major purchases, the condo, the car loans, even some of our credit cards. Marianne had insisted on it, claiming she wanted to help us build our credit, but really it was her way of keeping tabs on our financial situation and making sure Claire didn't do anything monumentally stupid with money. Which meant that when I'd started transferring assets and removing Claire's name from various accounts, Marianne had gotten notification letters for all of it. Every single transfer, every account closure, every legal document that officially severed Claire's claim to the life we'd built together. And Marianne, being Marianne, had probably spent the entire day on the phone with lawyers and accountants trying to figure out exactly how her daughter was. Claire started stammering some explanation about how it was all a big misunderstanding and she was working on fixing it, but you could tell from the way her voice kept getting higher and more frantic that she knew she was fighting a losing battle. Marianne had heard every excuse in the book during her decades in business, and she wasn't buying whatever Claire was trying to sell. Stop. Marianne's voice cut through Claire's rambling like a machete through jungle undergrowth. Just stop talking for 1 minute and listen to me. The bedroom went silent except for the sound of Claire's increasingly desperate breathing. I stayed where I was, leaning against the doorframe like I was watching a nature documentary about the mating habits of corporate executives. Sometimes the best seat in the house is the one where you can see everything, but nobody expects you to participate. I've spent the entire day on the phone with my lawyer, your lawyer, and 3 different accountants, Marianne continued. Her voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that suggested she was about 30 seconds away from driving over here and handling this situation personally. Do you want to know what I found out? Claire made some kind of squeaking noise that might have been a yes. I found out that your husband, who you've spent years telling me is too quiet, too passive, too boring, has systematically removed you from every significant asset you two own together. And he did it legally, cleanly, and with enough advanced planning to make my estate attorney weep with professional jealousy. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. There's something deeply satisfying about having your work appreciated by a professional, even when that professional is your soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law who's currently reading your soon-to-be ex-wife The Riot Act. But Mom, I can explain. No, you can't. Marianne's voice had dropped to that deadly quiet tone that meant someone was about to get verbally eviscerated. Because there's only one reason a man spends this much time and effort planning his exit strategy, and that's because his wife gave him a damn good reason to do it. Claire's face was going through more color changes than a mood ring in a hot car. She kept opening and closing her mouth like she was trying to form words, but nothing was coming out except these pathetic little gasping sounds. You always thought Marcus was quiet because he was weak, Marianne continued. And I could practically hear the disappointment dripping through the phone. Quiet men aren't weak, Claire. Quiet men are dangerous. They watch, they listen, they plan, and they remember everything. And you just found out why. That's when Claire finally found her voice again. Though it came out as more of a wail than actual words. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was just supposed to be. It was just supposed to be what? A little harmless fun with your boss. A temporary arrangement until something better came along. Do you think I'm stupid, Claire? Do you think I don't know exactly what kind of person you've become? The silence that followed was so heavy you could have used it to anchor a boat. Claire stood there with the phone pressed to her ear, tears starting to leak down her cheeks, probably realizing that her mother, the one person who was supposed to support her no matter what, had just officially joined Team Marcus. You made your bed, Marian said finally, her voice softer now, but somehow even more devastating. And now you get to lie in it alone. The line went dead, leaving Claire staring at her phone like it had just grown fangs and bitten her. She looked over at me with an expression that was equal parts desperation and disbelief, like she couldn't quite process that even her own mother had seen through her act. She hung up on me. Claire whispered. Yeah, I said, pushing myself off the doorframe. She did. And with that, Claire's last lifeline had just been cut. Tuesday morning rolled around like a hangover you didn't earn, and I was sitting in my new temporary apartment, a surprisingly decent one-bedroom place about 15 minutes from our old house. Drinking coffee that actually tasted good for once, and catching up on emails when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Not the usual spam and newsletter garbage that clogs up everyone's digital life, but actual messages from people I knew. People who, under normal circumstances, wouldn't text me unless someone had died or the world was ending. The first one was from my cousin Jake. Dude, is this your wife? Attached was a link to what looked like a Twitter post, which seemed weird because Jake usually spent his social media time looking at pictures of trucks and complaining about gas prices, not diving into workplace drama. But curiosity killed the cat, as they say, and I was feeling pretty immortal these days, so I clicked the link. What I found was beautiful in the way that car accidents are beautiful, horrible, and fascinating, and impossible to look away from. Someone had taken the audio from Claire's little performance at the company party and set it to a video clip of her from that night. All glittery dress and confident smirk raising her champagne glass like she was toasting her own brilliance. The caption read, when you think you're untouchable, but karma has other plans. Nail polish # corporate life # instant regret. The audio was crystal clear, clearer than I remembered it being in person, actually. Honestly, I can dump him anytime I want. He's completely useless to me at this point. Then that laugh, that sharp dismissive sound that had been the soundtrack to my marriage's funeral. Whoever had edited this thing had isolated her voice perfectly, removing most of the background noise, so every cruel word hit like a slap across the face. But here's the kicker, and this is where I had to give credit to whoever had put this together. They'd added a little text overlay that appeared right as she said, useless to me. It read, plot twist, he wasn't. The post had been up for maybe 6 hours and already had over 2,000 likes for 100 retweets and a comment section that was absolutely brutal. People were going off about workplace toxicity, emotional abuse, karma coming full circle, and the general satisfaction of watching privileged people get their comeuppance. It was like watching a digital lynch mob, except instead of torches and pitchforks, everyone was armed with gifs and crying laughing emojis. My phone kept buzzing as more people sent me the link, each message carrying its own flavor of, holy, is this really happening? My old college roommate Dave sent it with just a string of fire emojis. My neighbor from 3 houses down, a guy I'd spoken to maybe 5 times in 8 years, texted me the link with, bro, your wife is famous. Even my dentist's office manager somehow found it and sent it along with a message that read, saw this and thought of you. Hope you're doing well. But the real entertainment was watching the thing spread through Claire's professional network like a wildfire in a drought. Adrian, my new favorite corporate spy, had been keeping me updated on the internal damage control efforts. And apparently, the video had made its way into the company group chat faster than gossip spreads through a small town church. The comments from people who actually knew Claire were particularly savage. Her former assistant had posted a crying laughing emoji with the comment, when you finally see someone's true colors eyes. One of the junior marketing guys had written, "This explains so much about the last 2 years." Even people from other departments who'd probably never worked directly with her were piling on with stories about her attitude and general unpleasantness. Someone had created a whole thread breaking down the body language and facial expressions in the video, pointing out how she'd looked directly at Peterson while saying it, how her posture had been all confident and predatory, how she'd clearly thought she was performing for an audience that would appreciate her cruelty. The amateur psychology was probably, but it was entertaining, that was getting thousands of views and shares. By noon, the video had jumped platforms. Someone had downloaded it from Twitter and uploaded it to TikTok with trending sound effects. Another person had made it into a reaction video on Instagram using it as an example of toxic workplace behavior and red flags in relationships. There was even a LinkedIn post from some business coach type using Claire's moment of viral infamy as a teaching moment about professional ethics and workplace respect. The beauty of social media is that once something goes viral, it takes on a life of its own. People who had never heard of Claire or her company were sharing the video just because it fit whatever narrative they wanted to push about karma or marriage or workplace drama or women behaving badly. She'd become a symbol, a cautionary tale, a meme, and probably not in any way she would have appreciated. But here's where it got really interesting. The viral clip wasn't just entertainment for strangers on the internet. It was starting to have real-world consequences. Adrienne texted me around 2 o'clock in the afternoon with an update that made me actually laugh out loud. HR is freaking out. Someone sent the video to the regional office and now they're worried about the company's reputation. Legal wants to know if they can make it disappear. Good luck with that. I thought trying to remove something from the internet after it's gone viral is like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. Theoretically possible, but practically a waste of time and energy that usually just makes the mess worse. The comment section had become a digital anthropology exhibit showcasing every type of internet personality you could imagine. There were the righteous anger types calling for justice and accountability. The trolls making jokes about marriage and gender dynamics. The armchair psychologists diagnosing Claire with various personality disorders. The people sharing their own stories of workplace bullying and toxic relationships. My personal favorite comment came from someone with the username @KarmaChameleon2024. Imagine being so confident in your own superiority that you announce your evil plans at a work party like some kind of corporate supervillain. This is what happens when people confuse being mean with being powerful. Another gem, the audacity of talking about dumping your husband at a company event while your married boss is standing right there looking like he's ready to volunteer as tribute. The second-hand embarrassment is real, but it was the comment from @Quieterm78 that really got me. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They're not plotting because they're weak. They're plotting because they're smart. This woman just learned the difference the hard way. By 5 o'clock, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times across all platforms. Claire had gone from unknown marketing executive to internet cautionary tale in less than 72 hours. Her professional reputation wasn't just damaged. It was digitally pickled for posterity, preserved forever in the amber of viral content. And the best part, this was just Tuesday. The week was still young. A week later, Claire got the call she'd been dreading since the night her world started falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. It came on a Thursday morning at exactly 9:15, delivered by someone from HR, whose voice sounded like they'd rather be doing literally anything else in the world than making this particular phone call. The message was short, sweet, and about as ominous as a message could be without actually including the phrase, "You're totally screwed. Miss Hale, we need you to come in for a meeting today at 2 o'clock. Please report to conference room B on the 15th floor. Bring your employee handbook and any company property you may have at home." Now, when HR tells you to bring your employee handbook to a meeting, that's corporate speak for "we're about to destroy your career so thoroughly that archaeologists will find the wreckage centuries from now and wonder what the hell happened here." When they also ask you to bring any company property, that's them basically saying, "We want to make sure you can't steal anything on your way out because we don't trust you as far as we can throw you." Claire had spent the week since the viral video went live in what I can only describe as a state of suspended animation. She'd been staying at her sister's place. Apparently, our house had become too depressing for her to handle. What with all the empty spaces where my stuff used to be? And from what I'd heard through various sources, she'd been alternating between frantic phone calls to lawyers and staring at her phone, watching her professional reputation get shredded in real time across social media. The video had taken on a life of its own, spawning reaction videos, think pieces about workplace culture, and even a few TikTok duets where people recreated her smug expression while lip-syncing to her own words. Someone had turned it into a ringtone. Another person had made it into a custom notification sound for when their ex texted them. The internet had basically turned Claire into a meme about karma and comeuppance, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. But the meeting that was different. That was the real-world consequences catching up to the digital humiliation. And there's something deeply satisfying about watching someone who thought they were untouchable finally get called to account for their actions. I knew about the meeting because Adrian had texted me that morning with a simple message. It's happening today. 2 p.m. Conference Room B. Bring popcorn. Not that I was planning to be anywhere near that building when it went down, but it was nice to know that justice was finally being served with a side of corporate bureaucracy. Claire spent the morning getting ready like she was preparing for battle, which in a way I guess she was. She'd apparently borrowed one of her sister's power suits, a navy blue number that probably cost more than most people's rent, and had gotten her hair done at some fancy salon that specialized in making people look like they had their together, even when they absolutely didn't. The makeup was flawless, the lipstick was perfect, and she'd probably practiced her innocent victim expression in the mirror until she could deploy it on command. According to Adrian's subsequent play-by-play, which he provided with the enthusiasm of a sports commentator calling the Super Bowl, Claire arrived at the building at exactly 1:55, walking through the lobby like she owned the place and nodding at the security guards like they were old friends instead of people who'd probably been instructed to escort her out if things went sideways. She took the elevator to the 15th floor with the kind of confident stride that suggested she'd convinced herself this was all just a big misunderstanding that could be cleared up with the right combination of charm, denial, and strategic tears. The kind of confidence that comes from spending your entire life believing that rules are for other people and consequences are something that happens to folks who aren't as smart as you are. But when she reached Conference Room B and pushed open those heavy wooden doors, whatever confidence she'd managed to scrape together probably evaporated faster than water on hot concrete. The room was set up like a tribunal, not the kind of casual, let's chat about your future with the company meeting she'd probably been expecting, but a full-scale corporate execution chamber complete with all the key players arranged around a massive conference table like judges at a trial. There was Patricia from HR looking like she'd rather be getting a root canal without anesthesia. There was Williams from legal, a guy who looked like he'd been born wearing a suit and had never smiled a day in his life. There was someone from compliance, not Adrian, thankfully since that would have been a little too obvious, but some other corporate drone whose job it was to make sure the company didn't get sued into oblivion. And at the head of the table, like the Grim Reaper wearing a business suit, sat Harrington himself. The same regional director who dragged her out of the company party a week ago. Except now he looked calm and collected instead of rage-fueled, which if you ask me is way more terrifying than someone who's obviously pissed off. The blinds were drawn, blocking out the afternoon sunlight and giving the whole room this artificial fluorescent-lit atmosphere that made everyone look like they were dying of some wasting disease. There was a monitor mounted on the wall that was currently displaying the company logo, but something about the way it was positioned suggested it wouldn't be showing corporate branding for much longer. Ms. Hale, Harrington said as Claire took the single empty chair that had been left for her, positioned, of course, so that she was facing everyone else like a defendant at trial. Thank you for coming in today. Claire managed a weak smile and some polite response about being happy to clear up any misunderstandings. But her voice had that tight, controlled quality that people get when they're trying really hard not to throw up or run screaming from the room. That's when Williams from legal opened his briefcase. And let me tell you, there's no sound quite like a lawyer opening a briefcase full of evidence that's about to ruin your life. It's like hearing the safety being clicked off a gun, except instead of bullets, it's loaded with receipts, documentation, and legally binding proof that you're completely and totally screwed. Before we begin, Williams said in the kind of monotone voice that suggested he'd done this dance many times before, I want to make sure you understand that this meeting is being recorded for legal purposes and that you have the right to have an attorney present. Claire's face went a little paler, but she managed to shake her head and mumble something about not needing a lawyer because she hadn't done anything wrong, which if you ask me is exactly what someone says right before they find out how very, very wrong they are. That's when the monitor lit up. The first image was a scanned receipt from a hotel in Miami. The Fontainebleau, to be specific, one of those ridiculously expensive places where a single night costs more than most people make in a week. The date stamp showed it was from 3 months ago during what Claire had claimed was a client development conference that she'd attended alone, except the receipt showed 2 guests. Can you explain this charge to the company credit card? Williams asked, his voice still perfectly neutral. Claire stared at the screen like she was trying to will it to spontaneously combust. There was a client dinner. I had to book an extra room for security purposes. The next image was a flight manifest showing 2 passengers, Claire Hale and David Peterson. Same dates, same destination. Security purposes, Williams repeated like he was tasting the words and finding them bitter. Interesting. More images followed in rapid succession. Hotel bills from Chicago, San Francisco, New York, all showing the same pattern of 2 guests, all charged to company accounts, all coinciding with Peterson's travel schedule. It was like watching a slideshow of corporate malfeasance. Each image more damning than the last. But then came the audio files. The first one was a phone recording of Claire's voice discussing project timelines with Peterson, except the projects they were talking about seemed to involve a lot more room service and spa treatments than actual work. The second was even worse. A conversation about how to coordinate their collaborative sessions to avoid suspicion from other team members. Claire's face had gone from pale to ashen to something approaching the color of old newspaper. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the water glass someone had thoughtfully provided, probably anticipating that she'd need something to keep her from passing out during her own professional execution. Ms. Hale Harrington said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel through skin. Your employment with this company is terminated effective immediately. The words hung in the air for a moment, final and absolute as a death sentence. Claire opened her mouth to say something, probably to protest or deny or make some last-ditch effort to save herself, but Harrington held up a hand to stop her. Furthermore, he continued, the company will be pursuing all available legal remedies to recover the funds that were misappropriated during your tenure here. Our legal department will be in touch with you regarding restitution and potential criminal charges. Criminal charges. The words hit Claire like a physical blow, and I could practically see her entire future crumbling in real time as she realized that this wasn't just about losing her job. This was about potentially losing her freedom, too. The meeting lasted another 10 minutes, but it was really just paperwork and formalities at that point. Claire signed whatever they put in front of her with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold the pen, probably too shocked to really understand what she was agreeing to. When it was over, security was waiting outside the conference room to escort her to her desk to collect her personal belongings and then out of the building forever. Her career wasn't just over. It had been obliterated so thoroughly that the wreckage would be visible from space. And somewhere across town, I was sitting in a coffee shop reading a book and enjoying the fact that justice, while sometimes slow, is usually pretty thorough when it finally shows up. At exactly 3:40 in the afternoon on what had to be the worst Thursday of Claire's entire existence, I was sitting in my car across the street from her former workplace, sipping a surprisingly decent latte from the coffee shop down the block and watching the corporate equivalent of a public execution unfold in real time. Not because I'm some kind of sadistic monster who gets off on watching people's lives implode. Okay, maybe a little bit, but because sometimes you need to see the final chapter of a story you helped write. The building where Claire used to have an office was one of those generic glass and steel monuments to corporate mediocrity that probably looked impressive to people who'd never seen actual architecture. All gleaming surfaces and sharp angles that were supposed to convey success and innovation, but mostly just screamed. We spent way too much money on a building that looks like every other building in the financial district. From my vantage point across the street, I had a perfect view of the main entrance, which meant I'd have front row seats when the star of today's show made her final exit. Adrienne had been texting me updates throughout the meeting, like he was providing commentary for some twisted sporting event. She's in the building. Conference room door just closed. I can hear voices through the wall, but can't make out words. Someone just called security to stand by. Each message was like another nail being hammered into the coffin of Claire's professional life. And I won't lie, I was enjoying every single ping of my phone. The weather was perfect for this kind of thing. If you believe in cosmic justice and meteorological irony, gray clouds rolling in from the west. The kind of sky that looks like it's about to open up and dump rain on everyone's parade. The wind was picking up too, sending loose papers and plastic bags skittering across the pavement like urban tumbleweeds. It was the kind of afternoon that made everything feel slightly apocalyptic, which seemed appropriate for what was happening inside the glass tower. I'd been parked there for about an hour, long enough to watch the normal rhythm of office building life play out in front of me. People coming and going, deliveries being made. The occasional smoker huddled near the entrance trying to get their nicotine fixed before heading back to whatever soul-crushing cubicle they called home. Normal people living normal lives, completely oblivious to the fact that someone's entire existence was being systematically demolished 15 floors above their heads. Then at 3:41, the main entrance doors swung open and there she was. Claire emerged from the building like she was walking underwater, moving with the kind of slow, deliberate steps that people take when they're trying really hard not to fall down. She was carrying a cardboard box, one of those generic office supply store boxes that companies use when they want to make your termination feel as impersonal and humiliating as possible. The contents looked pathetic from where I was sitting. A small desk plant that was probably already dying. A few picture frames, what looked like a coffee mug with some inspirational printed on it. 8 years of corporate climbing, networking, ass-kissing, and backstabbing, and it all fit in a box that probably cost $3 at Staples. Her power suit was still immaculate, navy blue and perfectly tailored. The kind of outfit that cost more than most people's rent and was designed to make the wearer look like they had their together, even when they absolutely didn't. But the woman wearing it looked like someone had sucked all the life out of her through a straw. Her shoulders were slumped, her head was down, and she was moving with the mechanical precision of someone who was running on autopilot because their actual consciousness had checked out sometime around the moment they realized their career was over. The security guard who escorted her out was trying to be professional about it, but you could tell he was uncomfortable with the whole situation. He was walking a few steps behind her, close enough to intervene if she tried anything stupid, but far enough away to give her some dignity during what was probably the worst moment of her professional life. When they reached the sidewalk, he said something to her, probably some generic corporate-mandated farewell about how her key card access had been deactivated and she shouldn't try to return to the building, and then headed back inside, leaving her standing there alone with her cardboard box of broken dreams. That's when she started walking. And let me tell you, it was like watching a zombie movie, except instead of craving brains, this particular zombie was craving some way to undo the last week of her life. Her heels clicked against the pavement with this slow rhythmic sound that seemed way too loud in the afternoon air. Click, click, click. Each step taking her further away from the building that had been the center of her universe and closer to whatever uncertain future was waiting for her. She made it about half a block before she stopped, standing there on the sidewalk like someone who'd forgotten where they were going or why they'd started walking in the first place. That's when she looked around and I could see her face clearly for the first time since she'd left the building. She looked destroyed, not just upset or angry or even devastated. Those are emotions that suggest someone still has some fight left in them. Claire looked like someone who'd been completely hollowed out. Like all the confidence and ambition and ruthless determination that had defined her for as long as I'd known her had been surgically removed, leaving behind just an empty shell wearing expensive clothes. Her makeup was still perfect. Her hair was still professionally styled. Her outfit was still runway ready. But her eyes looked like someone had turned off all the lights behind them. She was staring at nothing or maybe at everything with the kind of blank expression you see on people who've just witnessed something so traumatic that their brain has shut down to protect itself. That's when our eyes met. I wasn't trying to hide or anything. My car was parked legally on a public street and I had every right to be there, but something made her look in my direction. Maybe some instinct left over from 8 years of marriage. Some unconscious awareness that the person who'd orchestrated her downfall might be nearby to witness the finale. When she saw me, her entire body went rigid. Not angry rigid or scared rigid, but the kind of frozen stillness you see in animals when they suddenly realize they're being hunted. Her mouth opened slightly like she was going to say something or call out to me, but no sound came out. She just stood there clutching her cardboard box of corporate debris, staring at me across 30 feet of city street like I was a ghost who'd materialized just to haunt her. For a moment, I thought she might try to approach me. There was something in her posture that suggested she was considering it. Maybe hoping for some kind of explanation or confrontation or final conversation that might make sense of what had happened to her life. Maybe she wanted to yell at me or beg me to somehow undo what I'd done or just ask me why I'd felt the need to destroy everything instead of just walking away quietly. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of any of those things. Instead, I just looked at her, really looked at her, taking in every detail of her professional defeat and personal humiliation. The way her perfect lipstick couldn't hide the fact that her mouth was trembling slightly. The way her designer suit couldn't disguise the fact that she was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. The way her expensive haircut couldn't cover up the fact that she looked like someone who just realized that all the rules she'd thought she understood were completely wrong. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't make any gesture of acknowledgement or triumph or even basic human recognition. I just sat there behind the wheel of my car, as calm and collected as I'd been for the past week, and let her see exactly how little effect her destruction had on me. Because here's the thing about revenge that nobody tells you in the movies. The best kind isn't hot and explosive and dramatic. The best kind is cold and calculated and absolutely final. It's not about making someone suffer in the moment. It's about making them understand that their suffering is the natural consequence of their own choices and that the person they hurt isn't even angry anymore. I wasn't angry at Claire. I wasn't hurt or betrayed or desperate for her to understand what she'd done to me. I was just done. Finished with her. Finished with our marriage. Finished with the whole toxic dynamic that had defined our relationship for way too long. She'd called me useless and I'd proven her wrong in the most comprehensive way possible. End of story. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds, I started my car. The engine purred to life with that satisfied sound that well-maintained vehicles make when they're ready to take you somewhere better than where you've been. I put the car in drive, checked my mirrors like any responsible driver would, and slowly pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. Didn't check the rearview mirror to see if she was still standing there watching me leave. Didn't give her even that small acknowledgement of her existence in my world. As I drove away, merging into the afternoon traffic that would carry me back to my new apartment and my new life, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete and utter peace. Not the temporary satisfaction of getting revenge, but the deep lasting contentment that comes from knowing that a chapter of your life is truly and permanently closed. Claire would probably spend the next few months, maybe years, trying to rebuild her career and her reputation. She'd have to explain to future employers why she'd been terminated from her last job, why there were viral videos of her being cruel and unprofessional, why her former company was pursuing legal action against her. She'd have to live with the knowledge that her own words and actions had destroyed everything she'd worked for, and that the man she dismissed as useless had orchestrated her downfall with surgical precision. But that was her problem now, not mine. The traffic light ahead turned green, and I pressed the accelerator, leaving the scene of Claire's professional execution behind me like a bad memory that had finally been resolved. In my rear-view mirror, the glass building where she used to work grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, taking with it the last physical reminder of a life I was grateful to be done with. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was something much more powerful and permanent than either of those things. It was closure. And closure, unlike revenge, doesn't need an audience to be complete. As I drove toward my new life, I couldn't help but smile. After all, she'd been wrong about one thing. I wasn't useless. I was just getting started.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.